It's Friday. It's 12:34, and you ain't got – never mind. Sorry, wrong movie. It is Friday, and it is Notre Dame mailbag time here at Irish Breakdown. Had to get my little Friday. You know what I mean? It's Friday. You ain't got to do.
Yeah.
But we got a lot to do today. We
Yeah,
have
we
a
do.
Notre Dame football mailbag today, and I just want to say right away, you cannot ask about Dante Moore. I'm just kidding. We would have a 5-minute show if we couldn't talk about Dante Moore today. I'm in one of those moods, Vince. Before we begin, just a quick reminder, everybody, make sure you check out all of the people we have a partnership with. Obviously, check out the merch store at the bottom, Built Bar. If you use the code below, you get 10% off. If you have not joined the message board, do so. We have a lot going on. Got some intel stuff about Drake Bowen and who he's going to be hanging out with this weekend on campus. Dante Moore has scheduled a visit to Notre Dame. It's going to be a 2-day trip. Got tons going on. And, of course, we're always going to have the latest. So sign up. It's at boards@irishbreakdown.com. If you sign up for a monthly membership, it's $4.99 a month, and it's not a special. We're not going to charge you that now or $1 now, and then a year from now we're going to raise it up to $10 or whatever the case may be. This is what our rate is. If you sign up for a monthly membership at $4.99 a month, you get 10% off your entire next purchase in the merch store, the Irish Breakdown merch store. If you sign up for an annual membership at $49.99, and it is worth it, trust me, you get 20% off your next purchase and the entire purchase in the Irish Breakdown merch store. Also, I've had some people ask me about other ways to be able to get our content besides just having to look for the site every day or on Twitter and Facebook, because a lot of people don't want to be on Twitter and Facebook. You can sign up for our daily newsletter, which you'll find in the description below. Also, we have started posting our content on as many social media platforms as we can that actually facilitate posting news articles. So you can also find us on Getter. What are they called, Vince? I don't really. Gab, Getter, and Parler are ones that we do. And then, of course, if you are not subscribed to our Irish Breakdown Facebook page, another place to go is the Notre Dame football news page on Facebook. Biggest Notre Dame fan page around. Lots of good conversation, but they also allow us to post all of our content there. So there's lots of ways that you can get Irish Breakdown, but the easiest is to just bookmark irishbreakdown.com.
Absolutely.
And listen to and just check our stuff out every single day. So I just wanted to get that out there. If you're looking for other ways to find our information, we are also going to start publishing videos more and more on Rumble here coming up soon, but we're still trying to work some things out over there because we are just trying to get on as many platforms as possible. And so that's what's going on, Vince. And without further ado, Vince, you know what time it is.
I do know what time it is.
It's
just
Friday
described
time.
Some of the social media platforms I've never even heard of. Like that.
I've only heard of these recently. I'm starting to get people's like, hey, I'm not on Twitter, and you always talk about you put stuff on Twitter, and I'm like, well, what are you on? I'm like, because if it wasn't for the job, I wouldn't even be on Twitter. I hate social media, to be perfectly honest with you. But I said, okay, they're on Gab or Getter and all these other things. And so I was like, okay, cool. So signed up for those, and we are now putting all of our content out on those as well. So there you go. You can check it out. So anyway, let's get down to it, man. Let's get down to it. So you got the questions piling up over there. So let's get rocking and rolling. All right.
Right off the bat, hitting lead off today is JoJo Pineda. It says, good afternoon and happy Friday, guys. All this talk about elite quarterback and arm talent. I watched highlights of Elway on YouTube. Oh, wow. Okay, so he knows how to get on Brian's good
He's
side.
trying to get to my heart.
I was going to say, yeah, it's going to get teary-eyed over there. It's getting misty. He says, wow, can you say Mahomes or Allen are closest to him?
Early on, I thought it was Pat Mahomes. I thought Pat Mahomes was the closest thing I've seen to John Elway. I think Josh Allen is even closer in style of play to John Elway. And the reason I think, obviously, both of them have rocket arms, right? And the thing about Pat Mahomes is he does so much kind of off script, and Elway used to do a ton off script. I mean, everybody talks about the whole phone off platform and making plays off script and all that. Like Elway was doing that back in the 80s. I mean, if you haven't watched any John Elway clips, I mean, there's a clip of him against the Kansas City Chiefs where he ends up scrambling around. He rolls all the way to like almost the right, like the numbers on the right sideline, throws a ball 40 yards downfield, but up the far opposite numbers hits a receiver. I mean, that's like an 89, like it's like a 70-something yard throw. I mean, he just used to do stupid stuff. And then, of course, he was a great runner, too, was in the New York Yankees minor league baseball system. I think that somebody hit like 400 in his one summer with the Yankees minor league team. He was just a phenomenal athlete. And, so very, very dynamic player, played on some bad teams. I think both of those guys remind me a lot of John Elway. The closest thing, I mean, I've never really seen anyone that reminded me of John Elway until these two cats came along.
Yeah.
And I got to tell you, Vince, I am so glad they're both in the same division, because we're going to get to see these two dudes battle like time and time. I hope anyway. Because like we never saw Elway and Marino really face each other that much.
They're on opposite ends of the country. I mean,
but I mean in the playoffs.
Never right.
Well, like the Broncos only played the Dolphins, I think, like twice in the playoffs during their entire tenures. I don't think they ever really faced each other in the playoffs. So I'm hoping that they're both good enough to where they can constantly meet in the playoffs. Because those guys, I mean, that battle, even just the fourth quarter alone of that playoff game this year was tremendous, because they're two quarterbacks that have the ability to put a team on their shoulders and make them better. They make people around them better. It's like, people say, well, Chiefs should have paid Tyreek Hill. No, they shouldn't have.
No.
Go see what Tyreek Hill does when he's got Tua Tagovailoa throwing passes to him and not Pat Mahomes, right? Still a great player, but I'm sorry. I don't need to have the highest paid wide receiver in the NFL playing with Pat Mahomes. I just don't need it.
It's not necessary.
Right. So yeah, if you haven't ever seen highlights of video of Elway, just do it. Right. I mean, it's just he's special. He's
right.
special.
And I know JoJo's a young guy, so he probably never saw Elway play.
Well, that's what I love about it. It's what's great about YouTube is like, you one of the things I watch when I get bored is there's these reaction videos that people do on Facebook, right? Or on YouTube. And it'll be people like that have never seen like Larry Bird play before. They only know like what their friends who, think modern NBA is the greatest NBA ever tell them. And they're like, dang, you know what I mean? Like, this is a bad dude, right?
So
yeah,
wrong.
that's why I love, because you can go back and you can watch. If you don't know about how great Dominique Wilkins was, you can go back and get on YouTube and find out. If you don't know how great John Elway was, you can get on YouTube and go find out. And that's one of the things I like about YouTube is that. So, yeah, if you haven't seen John Elway play or you haven't seen highlights, go watch him, because he did some stupid stuff back in the 80s and then the early 90s as well. He just was on some not very good teams, unfortunately. But I'll say this, he was the only person I've ever seen consistently take mediocre teams and take them to Super Bowls multiple times. And, when he finally actually got great talent around him, even though he was old, he still won back-to-back Super Bowls. Imagine what he could have done if he had I don't know, Jerry Rice and John Taylor and Roger Craig and guys like that his whole career. Would have been fun to see. Absolutely. So, and I know JoJo's got another quarterback question here coming up.
Oh, he's having another question? Okay.
Yeah, I think kind of a comment.
Here we go.
Yeah. Mailbag Friday is not just about questions. It can also be about comments,
Okay, well, I'm throwing them all up then. All right, JoJo's next up. Hope we knocked it out again with Moore, and the staff can close on him soon. I'm not expecting a commitment, but hopefully soon thereafter. And then Q Kibbs wants to jump. Will there be limo accommodations made on this visit with photo ops with his state ring? Just kidding. That was a terrible situation. We're not going there. And choice.
Now, you know what? I know people hated that. I had no problem with that from Jimmy Clausen. I didn't. I don't know why everybody got so upset about it. I thought it was pretty cool, right? This 5-star number one player in the country, committing to Notre Dame pulls up. To me, I feel like it was not received well then. Today, people would look at it as, ooh, what great promotion and what great branding and all this other kind of stuff.
It would have landed better than it did before.
Yeah,
I absolutely agree with that.
I got no problem with it. I just think everything Jimmy did was just kind of, like the Midas touch. It was like the opposite of that.
Yeah.
I feel like that's Jimmy's problem, is because people didn't like him, that they took things that he did that were excellent, or like this, just kind of fun and harmless, that weren't even, I don't think, his idea.
I guarantee it wasn't his idea.
Jimmy gets punished a lot for the sins of the father. Let's just put it that way. Leave it at that.
That's fair.
Move on and
that's fair. That's fair. No, that's fair. JoJo again is hopefully we start landing some elite wide receivers like James, no line recruits soon. How are we doing with Freeling? Now he's looking at Florida, and we're still battling Clemson too.
You all have to stop. See, this is where Twitter has just destroyed how fans follow recruiting, because they see these things like, oh, he was hit this place. Oh, so now we got – no, they've been recruiting him. Florida didn't just now get on Monroe Field. He just now had time to go down and take a visit, right? Like, we got to just breathe. I have a friend of mine who's been following recruiting since like the 70s. And he always – the first question he asked me about every recruit, who leads? And I'm like, nobody. Most of these kids don't have leaders. Like, they just like schools. And then they start to narrow things down. But look, Notre Dame's in a great place with Monroe Freeling. He plans on being back on campus. Jojo, I know you're on the message board, so check out the visitor list that we have tagged at the top, and you will see Monroe Freeling on there. He is coming up, I believe, for the Blue Gold game. I believe is his planned next trip, but I think Notre Dame's in a really good place there. Obviously, Clemson's going to be tough to beat. I think Clemson right now would be the school that I'd probably be most concerned about. I'm not overly concerned about Florida at this point in time, but you know, in recruiting, guys, things change all the time. That's why you can't get so wrapped up in like where things are like right this moment, because unless a kid is in decision-making mode, those things change all the time. So I like where Notre Dame is at. I'll feel better when he gets back on campus, because it's, you know, what he was here January 29th, I think was the last time he was on campus. And I think it's one of those things where, JoJo, you know, at the beginning of your question, you said, hopefully we can start landing some elite receivers. Like, I think you're going to see a domino effect here start to fall in April. And I'm going to have an article out this weekend kind of talking about how big the month of April is for Notre Dame in recruiting. And it's kind of strange, you know, because you think April, it's kind of early, right? But that's just kind of where Notre Dame is in regards to top players and needing to kind of get that domino effect going. I think this has a chance to be a really special month for Notre Dame. It's going to be about closing, though, right? And that's going to be the key.
Always is. Yeah.
If they can close, and I think closing on one makes it easier to close on two, which makes it easier to close on then and bam, 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 bam. That's how it kind of works. Because that's what happened on defense. Like they got Keeley and Vernon to start off, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, snap, I want to be on board with that. And then all of a sudden, you know, this guy comes on board, Drake Bowen comes on board, you know, this other guy comes on board, and all of a sudden the defensive class is just rocking and rolling, right? And I think that's kind of where the offense will get to once they can kind of get a domino or two. And I think that there's another question below that we'll get to that I'll kind of start to, you know, discuss who those dominoes might be.
Okie doke. JoJo says clocking a 4.54 in the 40 for Kyron is a nice improvement. It should help with his stock, and Hamilton with improving his 40 time as well. And I know Hamilton didn't have the 40 time he was looking for. It was better than the combine, right?
But not much.
Not much.
Yeah, it's 4.56 is the official. Now, Ryan was there. Ryan Roberts was there. He had him in like a 4.63. So, you know, it was kind of the range that he was at. But, yeah, not great times. He said, you know, I want to get back to running a 4.47s and all that other kind of stuff. And, you know, but honestly, I really don't care. I really don't. I care more about Kyron Williams' numbers than I do Kyle Hamilton's, because Kyle has other traits that, like, you know, his explosiveness numbers at the combine were phenomenal, like 38-inch vertical, almost 11-foot broad. You know, that tells me there's some explosiveness there. He's a 6'4", long-legged guy. I mean, Kyle's not just 6'4". He's built more like a basketball. We've talked about this. He's built more like a basketball player, which means longer legs. I don't know if the 40 time is ever going to be that. I just know on the football field, he covers a ton of ground and as fast as anybody in the country. So, you know, I just I don't worry too much about that. For Kyron, I thought it was more important because his number was so bad. I mean, his 40 time was so bad at the combine. I mean, 4.65. But the other thing that hurts Kyron is he's really small. He did that at 194, which is small, and he also had nothing else was really good. I mean, his explosive numbers were not good. His vertical was pedestrian. His broad was pedestrian. So he needed something to kind of get some positive momentum going, and hopefully a 4.54 can kind of be that. You know, I think that'll be something that I think is going to help him and his draft stock.
We got a super chat from Brandon. Thank you very much, Brandon. He says, I'm still, for some reason, concerned about Dante visiting Ohio State. I'm assuming he doesn't mean Oklahoma State. Hopefully he's just going.
If Brandon's worried about Oklahoma State, come on, man. You know what I mean? Like,
I know.
We need to take deep breaths, buddy.
We had all those OSUs during bull prep.
I know it was super confusing. Now you're in tune to think Oklahoma State now because of all that for a month. Yeah, I get you, man. I get you.
He says hopefully he's just going so he can hang with Carnell and convince him to join him at Notre Dame.
I don't think either one of those things are true. Number one, I am not worried about Ohio State at all. Never have been. I've had a friend of mine, the same one that was talking to me about who's the leader for the first 2 months of Dante Moore's recruitment. He would almost on a daily basis. I'm really worried about Ohio State. I'm really worried. I'm like, come on, man. Like, just like I'm going to have to put you on a calling me timeout. You know what I mean? Because I'm getting tired of answering the same question over and over again. I'm really not concerned about Ohio State. I'm for a host of reasons. But he's just never really seemed to be all that interested in Ohio State. But he is doing this bus tour and he's getting to see all these schools. I just think Dante is – look, you got to understand, Dante's a really bright kid. I think he just wants to have as much data and information as possible so that when he sits down to make his decision, he can say, hey, look, I have all the information that I need to make this decision, and here's my decision. And so I'm just not concerned about Ohio State. I also don't think Dante would be the kind of kid that would go on someone else's campus to convince and recruit for another school. He just doesn't strike me as that kind of kid. I just think it's like, hey, look, it's more about this. You've recruited me hard. Out of respect, before I sit down and make my decision, I'm going to come and see what you have to say. I think that's really more of what it's about. Now, anything could happen during those visits, but I just don't see this being a big concern. And people say, well, Ohio State's had great quarterback play. Yeah, but name me one good Ohio State quarterback in the NFL. I mean, that's what people say about Notre Dame, right? Like, can't name any good Notre Dame quarterback. Okay, name me an Ohio State quarterback in the last 20 years has been any good. I can't really think of one. So they don't really have that advantage. It's about the numbers and the production. Well, Notre Dame's been able to sell him on that based on how they finished last season. And not just the Oklahoma State game, but they threw for over 3 bills against Stanford. They threw for over 3 bills against Georgia Tech. Jack Coan completed like over 70% of his passes, threw a mess of touchdowns in the last 5-6 games, scored 40 points a game, all that kind of stuff. So Notre Dame has been able to sell that. I'm just not overly concerned about Ohio State. Maybe I should be, but I'm not and haven't been really this entire time.
Love it. Love it. And then just to continue on the Dante Moore train, it says, heard a certain elite quarterback has locked in a visit per Brian unofficial. Has he used his official yet? And is he enrolling early to his college choice? Go Irish.
Yeah, so just so you know, if you were on the message board, you'd have learned this a little over an hour ago, but Dante has locked in an unofficial visit to Notre Dame. He will be on campus. The plan as of right now, this is the first time it's actually been kind of locked in. There's been lots of different dates floated around, the 26th, 28th, and 29th, maybe even next Thursday. But we do believe he will be on campus on Monday. That we did get confirmation of this morning. The plan is he's going to stay until Tuesday. At least that's the plan as of right now. As we learn with Carnell Tate, those things can change. But that is the plan. Officials yet, no one has taken an official visit yet in this class. Those don't start till June. So every single visit that every single recruit has been on has been unofficial. Now that matters not because I care about technicalities. The reason it matters to know that, JoJo, is when you think of the kids that have visited Notre Dame from all over the country, and you think of Jaden Alsbury coming up from Louisiana and Samuel Mpemba coming up from Florida and Braylon James coming up from Texas and Monroe Freeling coming up from South Carolina, those kids are all coming up on their own dime. And that's ultimately there's several differences between it, but essentially an unofficial visit, any travel, any expenses, any lodging expenses that you incur are on you, the prospect, and the family. The school can pay for nothing. Vince, I think they can pay for like a lunch while you're on campus. I think that's right.
That sounds right. Because I've definitely seen them out and about, doing meals and things.
Yeah, so on campus. It's got to be like an on-campus meal, I believe.
Right, and you can go to the Morris Inn. I mean, they have really nice. They got fine dining at the Morris Inn.
Right.
I mean,
but the point is, you're footing the bill, right?
Right.
And so when gas has gotten even crazier recently, but gas has been high really since middle of 2021, right? I mean, it's been going way up. And so these kids are still making these trips during this time when it has been more expensive to travel. So I think it says a lot about the interest level that these prospects have in Notre Dame. So it is important for people to understand that all these visits have been unofficial, all of them.
Right. That
because
means
official
something.
visits don't kick off until June. And I've always said this, like Notre Dame's success rate of landing kids that have only come for official visits since sort of the recruiting calendar has been sped up. So the last 8-9 years is not good, right? When the only time you've been on campus is an official visit, their success rate is really low. So it's important to get these kids on campus for unofficials as well. And of course, Dante has been on campus like 7 or 8 times.
Right.
It's easier for him. Obviously, he's from
closer.
Detroit.
Yeah.
This is hot. It's a little bit more pricey now. I mean, even a 2.5, 3-hour drive nowadays is going to cost you a little bit, right? Like, did you see the Ice-T thing on Twitter yesterday?
I don't think so. No.
Ice-T, right? The rapper put this thing out. I got to read it because I thought it was. I even called and read it to my dad. I thought it was flipping hilarious. And I know some people are freaking out about it, but I mean, just sometimes you got to learn to laugh a little bit, people. But Ice-T put this tweet out, and at first, I mean, he got me. Like I was thinking he was being for real. Like he got me at first. And he says, he tweeted, "I was robbed at a gas station in New Jersey last night. After my hand stopped trembling, I managed to call the cops, and they were quick to respond and calm me down. My money is gone. The police asked me if I knew who did it. I said yes. It was pump number 9."
I saw somebody do something similar to that. They probably just stole it from him or vice versa. So yeah, that was hilarious.
Yeah. So anyway,
not wrong, by the way.
It's still a little bit expensive coming over from Detroit, but it's it's a very doable trip.
Right. Absolutely.
So it'll be good to get Dante Moore. Get Dante Moore back on campus. No question about it.
We got another super chat from Zach Martin. Thank you, Zach, very, very much for the Vince Family Fund. Ooh, I like that. This should pay for a quarter of one meal. You are not wrong about that either. As a baseball coach myself, who never coached or played football, what is the biggest culture difference between a dugout and the sideline? It's a really good question. I would say the biggest difference, because when you're putting a team together, and that's one of the things I really like about my team this year, is the culture is really, really good with these guys. There's not a lot of big egos and things like that. But the biggest difference in game day is managing the lack of success. Because baseball, I mean, right? You only succeed 30% of the time, right? When you're up to bat and all that. So it's managing the not having success part, right? Like, hey, it's all good. You're going to get another at bat, or I need you in the field, or having a short memory, all those different things. It's different than football, right? In football, you mess up one time, like that, you're done. Like you could be done, right? And in baseball, you could mess up a bunch of times, but then you hit the game-winning hit, or you get, you do something really good one time, and you're really good to go. So that's really the difference for me. Is how you manage success or the lack thereof is completely different than in football.
I think for me, as I look at like culture difference between a dugout and the sideline, my first thought was taking it as a game, because I did play both sports.
Yeah, right.
I think football is a more intense sideline situation because you play so fewer games and you play once a week.
Right.
Whereas baseball, it's kind of like it's more like a marathon type thought. Like you can't get 2 up and 2 down. I mean,
3-4 games a week.
In Major League Baseball, you could be one of the best teams in the league and lose 62 times.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely.
I mean, if you think about that, so it's a less emotional situation for me. And baseball is more of a cool, calm, and collected kind of game. It's the difference between being at a baseball game and being in a football game.
Absolutely.
For me, so
it's more laid back. I mean,
right.
Like from an intensity standpoint, I agree with you. It's much more laid back, much more. Like it's kickoff of a football game. It's like, all right, let's go.
Yeah.
And then with baseball, it's like, okay, we're kind of easing into it. We're getting going and, getting a feel for the other team. And, I agree with that.
I have 2 comments I wanted to bring up that I just thought were funny. Here's one, Vince.
IB says, go ahead.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
Okay, it says Brian is a Notre Dame football fan psychiatrist. We all visit Dr. Driscoll when we panic. That's funny because it's true.
Very true. And then
and Q-Kib says, I felt like Brian was my elementary school teacher getting frustrated with the class with the Dante Moore panic this week.
both accurate comments. I try to be like, hey, look, I think the thing for me is because the social media world we live in and the type of media coverage that we have now, which is driven towards look, clicks, right? And I don't mean that disrespectfully. It's just the reality of it. Like when you have an advertising based revenue, like for example, when I publish Short Irish Breakdown, the more clicks it gets, the more views it gets, the more money I make, right?
Yeah,
So
right.
a lot of
Right.
people choose to say things in a way or write things in a way that's going to maximize the click value. And I
Absolutely.
understand that. And I do that sometimes as long as you're being true to the actual, like I'll make a headline that maybe is grabby, but you don't, yeah, this is anyway. Need to get into that, but so I mean, I'm not criticizing it. It's just some of the stuff is written in a way where it's like it's designed just to get clicks, and it's not really true to the spirit of what's happening or the news. And unfortunately, that's kind of what's happening because there's a certain writer that covers Michigan that I know he's known what we know about Dante Moore for a while. So what's he doing? He's either stupid, crappy at his job, maybe both. Or what I think is also more likely is that he understands what's happening. And so he is just going to maximize the click value until that happens. And then
I
be
want
able
to
to
believe.
lie and explain it away afterwards. Like, well, here's what really happened. No, this is all
Right.
true. But what happened was Notre Dame did this, or this. And, lie about it. And then, of course, Michigan fans, being Michigan fans, will just soak it up and believe everything that he says.
Lap it up like a dog.
That's just the nature of it. So that's why I tell people, like, look, like for example, last night, right? Like there was reports coming out that, Dante's locked in for Monday. And I'm like, okay, so let me talk to the people that I know. And they said, no, he's not locked in. Like we're trying to lock him in, but he's not locked in. So I had to get on the board and they're like, he's talking about Monday or Tuesday, Monday and Tuesday, or maybe even Thursday.
Right.
So I'd say, look, people, when I know, you'll know. And when you'll know that it's
the
where
real
it is,
deal.
right?
Exactly.
And so just don't live on every little tweet and every little thing from every little analyst and all that kind of stuff. Like that's why I say, let it play out. Right. Just let it play out. And in the end, it's like what somebody said. They were talking about, I'm trying to remember which recruitment it was, but they were talking about like the drama of a certain recruitment. And it was Dante Moore, isn't it? And they're like, oh, this drama of such and such. And maybe it was him. And I'm like, what drama? Like, there's been no drama. The drama is like is media related. Like there actually hasn't been any drama.
Right,
It's just the way it's being. Might have been something team related. I forget what it was. It was something that I can't remember what it was, but it was just like, this isn't really drama. We're creating the drama on our end.
Right, exactly.
And it's not really that kind of drama. And that's the part of the job that I don't particularly care much for.
And I don't blame you.
Especially when you have so many sites that are just not, how do I say this? They're not real professional sites, in my opinion. And they're not going to take the care for accuracy like we would, like a Tim Priester will, you know what I mean? Like Lou would always do. They don't care as much about that as someone who's as you should, in my opinion. And then leave it at that.
Yep.
So I'm just trying to help y'all kind of just realize it's not as much of a roller coaster as you think. I want you to be on kind of a normal, healthy ride. Okay. And it's all about your mental. There's enough stuff to stress about in this world. You know what I mean?
You need to hang up a sign right behind Dr. Driscoll is in. You know what I mean?
No.
The doctor is in.
No. All right, let's get back on track.
All right. If we must, we must. Here we go. RJG Irving says, hey, Brian, how about this? Notre Dame uses top 5 business school profs and students to teach NIL, entrepreneurship, media, contracts, financial literacy and planning, taxation, branding, and management of small business, I would imagine. That way, the elite professors and students work with elite athletes to help them.
I don't think they're referring to small buses, Vince.
Well, I mean, I drive a short bus to games. I mean, whatever. Succeed.
No comment.
Not that short bus. Both short-term and throughout life. Could be a business school, minor degree for both athletes and budding entrepreneurs. Notre Dame gives structure to an out-of-control situation, education, not cash. Cheers.
Well, I think you can have both. There's no reason not to have both. I mean, look, there's no reason that students in some way can't benefit from this billion-dollar entity. I am not a fan of making students employees. I am not a fan of paying student athletes. Just you're a part of the team. Here's your salary. I'm not a fan of that unless you're willing to say, okay, fine, but we'll give you a salary, but we're not going to pay for anything. Right? Like you got to pay for your own scholarship, you got to pay for your own tuition, all that kind of stuff, and then really teach them about the real world. Right? But the thing but I do think there are some ways in which they should benefit. Like if you're going to plaster a kid's name up on a billboard, then I'm sorry, that kid should get more than just his scholarship out of that. Because a scholarship is one of the stupidest arguments people make is, well, scholarship has no value. That's the dumbest thing in the world.
Are you kidding
me? Go ask a student who's not on scholarship if a scholarship has value, especially to a place like Notre Dame. However, that argument only goes so far.
Agreed.
And when 80,000 people are packing a stadium to watch those student athletes play, and you're using those student athletes' face or jersey number or name or whatever to promote the product, there should be some benefit to them.
Right.
And so I don't have a problem with name, image, and likeness in theory. I have no problem with these kids being able to make money off of that in theory. Some of the things the NCAA has done is just stupid. Like who's the kicker for like UCF or USF or something a few years ago? They had this YouTube channel that had nothing to do with sports, and they took it from him, or they told him he couldn't do it or he's ineligible. Like there's just so many stupid things like that aren't needed. And so I do think there needs to be a happy medium. I think to RJG's point, I do believe that Notre Dame needs to include the business department in the education aspect of this. I would make them part of the recruiting aspect of this. Of hey, here's the value you may make. You may only make $250,000 in your 4 years at Notre Dame. That's all you may make. If you're a top prospect, we're not going to give you the $2 million one-time payment that so and so is offering you. But here's why. Come here. This is why that $250,000 is going to end up being more valuable long term than the $2 million, right? Because there's a lot of fans that think, well, no, kids are always going to take the immediate path. That's nonsense. Because in anyone who follows we're talking about baseball, anyone who follows the Major League Baseball draft knows that lots of teenagers over the years have said, I'm going to turn down that guaranteed money, bet on myself, go back to school or go to college, and say, hey, I'm going to try this again in 3 years because A, I want to get a degree, or B, I think in 3 I can bet on myself and up it, right? Basketball players have done that. Football players do that all the time. What do you think a kid does when he's gets a second or third round draft grade and goes back to school?
That's
right? They're making the same exact decision, except now that decision means and this is what I factored into it for like Isaiah Foskey and some of those guys is I can go back to Notre Dame, not only up my draft stock, but I have this clothing line and I have these other things where I'm going to make some money. So, hey, you may only make $250,000 or $500,000 over 4 years, but here's how because you're at Notre Dame, here's how it becomes this. And I absolutely think Notre Dame needs to take advantage of that. RJG, I think that is absolutely needs to be part of the NIL discussion, where there are benefits to being at Notre Dame that you may not have at other places. And I would certainly do that. I would be bringing Brandon Wimbush in and talk about his company and how his relationship with a student while he was a student athlete has resulted in him combining to form a corporation that is going to be successful, because he was a top recruit that didn't make it at the next level. But his Notre Dame degree and his tenure at Notre Dame has helped him be successful in life. And he's, beyond what maybe you're going to get at an Alabama and Ohio State, places like that. So I think that needs to be part of it. I think that absolutely Notre Dame needs to be selling the heck out of that, but not in the way that you ended it. Like I was with you till the end, because my thing is, why not both, right? You can do both. Notre Dame is not going to use money as an enticement like schools are doing. They're just not. It's not allowed. I don't think the NCAA is going to do anything about it, but I'll tell you right now, when the NCAA would step in and start hammering teams for using money as an enticement? When Notre Dame starts doing it.
Exactly.
That's when the NCAA will step in and do it, because they've always been that way to Notre Dame. For some ungodly reason, one of the few schools that actually does it the right way, makes their kids go to class, doesn't allow kids to cheat, this, that, and the other. The NCAA has no – I think it's because they do it the right way. The NCAA is like, man, you guys are making us look bad. When you do it this way, and then it's just so whatever. It's screw them. But I was with you really till the end. I really do. I think Notre Dame needs to give structure to an out of control situation, and a lot of kids are receptive to that. That's what the conversation with Carnell Tate was about when he was on campus. Hey, look, man, this isn't a Tennessee's going to give you this, and we're giving you nothing. Here's what we're giving you, and here's how we're going to turn this into way even more than that. It's just you got to bet on yourself and this, that, and the other thing. And so I think they need to do that, and I think they do need to tie in different aspects of campus into those like that's something I would do as a recruiting coordinator. Is I would, we'd have to work with different departments on campus. Hey, look, I'm gonna have some students on campus. This kid's really into this academically. This kid wants to be a lawyer. He wants to get into pre-law. Can you sit down with him and can we talk about the program and how it works for a football player to be able to handle that? Those type of things should always be part of the conversation, and then really because I know this for a fact. There's professors on campus who are huge fans of the football program.
Oh, absolutely.
Now, they're not fans of the football program in that they're going to be giving you an A because you play football. But if they can step up and say, hey, look, we're going to help you. Here's how we can play our role in helping you become a great student athlete, and develop as a young person. Yeah, coach, we're all in. There's some people who don't like football on campus, but there are some who do. And you need to tap into those resources and say, look, we're trying to do it the right way, but we need your help to do so. And I think that would be received pretty well, I think, by some people on campus. No question about it.
Hulk Strongest. Hey, happy Aloha Friday. Happy Aloha Friday to you, Hulk Strongest. Who would you have, Carnell Tate or CJ Williams?
That's an easy one. Look, my opinion of CJ Williams has not changed. I love CJ Williams. He's a top 100 recruit. I wish Notre Dame would have got him. So this is not going to come across. I don't want this to come across like, whoa, you say that because
he's earned it. He's
my opinion of CJ never changed. I think he was very underrated by a lot of the services. I think Rivals in SI 99 are the only ones that got it right. SI All-American, the only ones that got it right. They had him like in the top 75. But Carnell Tate's a top 25 player. I mean, Carnell Tate's a legit – CJ was a really good top 100 guy. Carnell's a really good top 25, 30 guy. So Carnell's definitely a better player. And the other thing, too, is Carnell brings a little bit more dynamic ability to the table, where CJ, I loved him because he was going to be that volume guy that we talked about, 8 catches, 100 yards. Carnell can do that as well, but Carnell can also be a guy that gets you 100 on 3 or 4 catches.
Yeah, right.
And so I think he brings everything that CJ brought to the table, but a more dynamic package and a little longer package as well, because I think he's a little taller, a little bit longer arms, has more room to grow than CJ had, because CJ was kind of polished. And I think Carnell has that, but I think Carnell is going to get even better. And so, yes, I think that if I could have one of the two, I would rather have Carnell. But my answer ultimately would be is, why can't you have both? If you had a better receivers coach, you'd have both. And that's, at the end of the day, going to be, why do you have to choose? Like, well, Alabama doesn't. Oh, who'd you rather have? Both? You know what I mean? So that's where it needs to be.
Dave Grau, who would you predict would be the next 3 prospects to commit to Notre Dame?
Okay, that's all right. So I'm oh boy. Next 3. First of all, I think the next 3 to commit to Notre Dame will be offensive guys. If I just had to kind of go out on a limb and say, here's who I think it'll be, my opinion would be Charles Jagasaw, the offensive lineman from Illinois, who I think 2-on-3 has ranked as the number 7 player in the country. It would be Braylon James, who is a top 100 recruit, and it would be Dante Moore. And if you're a member of the message board, you know what I've been saying, a couple days ago I had a 95% confidence rating that by the end of April, I think Dante will have committed to Notre Dame. We'll see if he's going to do that or not, publicly do that or not. But, I think those are the 3 that right now, I think Notre Dame is in the best position to close for. Now, they got to close, right? That's the thing. They got to close. But if they do what they need to do, those are the next 3 guys that I think could pop. And if Dante is if I am correct about Dante, and again, we'll see how it plays out here and how the visit goes and all that kind of stuff. But if I am correct about Dante, you're going to see a major snowball, right? And some other guys that I think, maybe could be in line to commit this month. There's some other guys, some other receivers, some other offensive linemen. But to me, the ones that I'm most confident in are those 3.
You mean this month as in April, right?
As in April, yeah.
Sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So there's a few days of March
this
left.
Upcoming month.
There you go.
Yeah.
Domer Grizz, happy Friday. Who is responsible for scouting the transfer portal? Chad Bowden? Every coach? For basketball, Bray said Humphrey is tasked with checking theirs every day, even before having his coffee.
I'm not sure who that is. I don't think you can just have one person doing it, because there's so many more kids in the portal and football than there is basketball. I mean, you have about as many kids in your starting lineup on offense almost as you have on scholarship at a basketball team. What is it, like 13, 15? Is it up to – is it 13, 15? I forget which one it is now.
Yeah.
But, I mean, you're at 85 on football.
Big difference.
It's
staff.
And there's FCS kids and all that kind of stuff, which, doesn't really change because in basketball, all those FCS schools are just D1. So I don't know if it's just one. I don't know the answer to that, Domer Grizz. Probably should find that out, but I would hope that it's more than just one person. And I would imagine it's a whole staff of people doing that. I mean, and if they don't have that, they need to do that. They need to get people to say, hey, look, is this a guy that, number one, we would be interested in as a player? Yes. Then have this part of the staff reach out to the school, get the requests, get the academics, get this, get that before you really go much further with, getting them on campus. Because with the graduate players, it's a little easier, but with the undergrad kids, there's a lot you have to figure out before you can even think about bringing that kid on campus.
Yep, absolutely. If Buckner wins the job, who gets garbage time reps against Marshall? Same person for Navy? For example, early versus late in the year. Does either change if Dante Moore is committed?
Well, no, I mean, if Buckner wins the job,
so
what's that? Go ahead, Vince.
Well, Dante Moore is still going to be in high school.
No, I think I wonder if what he's saying is if you have Dante, then maybe you're. Here's where I think he's come with the equation. Domer Grizz, you tell me if he's correct. I think what he's saying is if they don't get Dante, you need to maybe focus on developing Angeli. I think that's where he's going with it. But if you get Dante, then you don't necessarily need to worry as much about developing Angeli. And Drew Pine would get it. That's where I think he's going with it. But I don't look at it that way because you got to develop Steve Angeli whether you get Dante Moore or not. I mean, you need to focus on developing all your quarterbacks. What if Dante gets hurt? What if, you know what I mean? What if something like that happens? And so what if he doesn't pan out, which is true for every quarterback? I mean, there's no such thing as a given.
Right.
So to me, if Buckner wins a job, who gets the quote unquote garbage reps? I mean, for me, it'd be Drew Pine. Now, would I try to maybe get Angeli some snaps? Yes, I would. But not until you've gotten Drew Pine some snaps because Drew needs to play. I mean, if Drew's going to be your backup quarterback, he needs the opportunity to play because if Buckner goes down, that can't be the first time. I mean, unless it's like in the opener, that can't be the first time Drew Pine has gotten on the field. And matter of fact, this isn't if they are blowing a team out early in the third quarter, I'd take Buckner out and put in Drew Pine. And not because, again, this is working with the assumption that Tyler Buckner wins the job. I do the same thing if Drew Pine starting, and I do the same with Tyler Buckner. Is if you're up 31-3 in the midway through the third quarter, I'm putting the other quarterback in and giving him a series or two of the first team defense. Because I think both of those series. Right. Yeah. Both of those kids need the work. And then if you do that, then that means your last half of the fourth quarter, you can then get Steve Angeli in and get him some work for 4 games. Because I want a redshirt Steve. But now what I love about the new rule is you can get 4 games. So, if you blow out both Cal and Marshall, I may not have them do it for both because there's still going to be some potential games later in the year against Navy and UNLV and Syracuse where you may get another shot to get him some reps. So I don't know if I necessarily do them both or you just have them play both of those games early. But I would say in one of those early games, I would just get more reps for Drew Pine or Tyler Buckner, whoever the backup is. And then I would try to get Steve into one of those games. And then later in the year, when you're blowing out UNLV, you can get him some more reps in the same sort of fashion. So that would be how I would do that. So Drew Pine is my backup. He needs the work. And I would look, I don't care who Notre Dame signed. I don't care if Notre Dame signed Dante Moore and Malachi Nelson and Arch Manning. You still develop Steve Angeli. You owe it to every single kid on your football team to treat them and develop them the best of your ability, Absolutely. Not just your starter. I believe that with all my heart. And so I don't think it changes if they get Dante Moore at all. But I could be wrong in reading into the question what I read into it. Let me see if he's responded to that yet. No, he has not. So, but anyway, that's kind of my thoughts.
We got a question from It's All About the Boom, which I like that name. Are the days of Notre Dame recruiting quarterbacks under 6 foot or quarterbacks who can't throw more than 20 yards over for good? Having quarterbacks who will help us win and who we don't win in spite of will be a nice change.
I mean, I'm with you on the last part. And number one, I don't. So you're not going to recruit Kyler Murray? You're not going to recruit Russell Wilson? You know what I mean? Like, Ian Book's height was not a problem. I keep telling everybody that, you know. But anyway, whatever. It is what it is. It's just it's not an issue for me.
Yeah.
The whole can't throw the ball over 20 yards. That doesn't. I don't know who that is.
It doesn't describe anybody.
I've said this before. Ian Book had an arm. I've said this many times. I mean, go back and watch the post route he threw to Braden Lindsey. That ball went about 60 yards in the air and dropped on a dime to Braden Lindsey. Ian Book's issues were here and here. Those were his issues. He had no physical deficiencies, in my opinion, in regards to being able to make an outstanding college quarterback. It was all, can he read and process information, right? And if you go back before that, I mean, look, Drew Pine doesn't have a cannon for an arm, but look at the touchdown pass he threw against Cincinnati. I mean, that was a far hash 30-yard touchdown, right? It's a decent throw. He doesn't have a big arm, but he's got a good enough arm. You know, I don't really kind of get into the whole you have to be this, or this. And I don't know anyone that can't throw over 20 yards. I mean, I know little 10-year-olds that can throw over 20. I mean, so I get the hyperbolic nature of it, but that doesn't represent anybody that Notre Dame has had, in my opinion. So 6 foot doesn't matter to me. Throw it over 20 yards. Look, who's the starting quarterback that Notre Dame has had that lacked arm talent? I'll bet you $100 that Ian Book has a better arm than Stetson Bennett, and he just won a national championship.
Oh, absolutely. I bet you that too.
Right now, again, you know, talent around him and all that other kind of stuff. But I'm just telling you, Ian Book can throw the ball. And anyone who's seen him in practice knows Ian Book's got an arm. The problem is a lot of people only saw him in games, Vince, where he was unwilling to make a lot of throws. So there's an assumption that he can't do this, that, and the other thing. And I'm just telling you, he can. It's just he was unwilling to do so.
Yeah. Unwilling. That's the key.
That's his big issue, right? But yes, they should not recruit quarterbacks under 6 feet tall who can't throw it more than 20 yards.
Oh,
no question.
My 7-year-old son should not be being recruited by Notre Dame right now.
But I think the bigger point is the last one.
Yeah.
I think that's the key, right?
Absolutely.
That's really where we need to harness on, where, you know, getting quarterbacks who help, who again, this is what we talk about, can put a team on his shoulders and carry you to success, as opposed to, you know, just the guy that you're winning in spite of. And even like, okay, like Drew Pine is not a guy, in my opinion, is going to put a team on his shoulders and lead him to victory. But you're not going to win in spite of him, though, if he wins the job, because he still is that point guard quarterback that I really like. But as we've said, there's that type of quarterback who I really like a Mac Jones. And then there's the Trevor Lawrences and the Joe Burrows that can just make a lot of plays. Like, for me, if Mac Jones is the quarterback for Clemson in 2019 when they played Ohio State, they lose that game. And I think Mac Jones is a heck of a quarterback. But Trevor had to do things in that game that went beyond just your ability to sit back and read and throw. He had to run. He had to scramble. He had to make just insane throws with his arm that a guy like Mac Jones, as great as he was, can't make. And so that's putting a team on your shoulders and saying, hey, I'm going to make everybody around me better. And when that limit has been reached and the other team is just better than those guys are, I'm going to then go make a play. And that's what Trevor Lawrence could do. That's what Justin Fields could do at times. He was at times seemed like he was unwilling to do that. Like, he wanted to prove so much. He was a pocket passer. He was unwilling to do that at times, especially in 2020. You know, but that's what guys like Kyler Murray can do. That's what Tua could do in college. You know, that's what Justin Herbert could do. You know, and that's really what separates the point guard quarterback from the elite quarterback. Because ultimately, you'd like an elite quarterback who can also be a point guard quarterback, right? Like, and that's what I think Tyler Buckner can be, and that's what I think Dante Moore can be. And so there is value to that. And so the part of the question that I think is spot on is Notre Dame needs to have quarterbacks who carry you to success, not are along for the ride. Like, it was a comment that Brian Kelly made about Everett Golson.
Yeah,
he's not driving the bus. He's, you know, whatever. You don't want quarterbacks like that. And I understand why Everett was doing that in 2012, a redshirt freshman, whatever, and didn't have the full grasp of the offense and all that. But ideally, that's the reason you went out in the championship game and got your butt whooped and couldn't score points, right? Because you didn't put him in enough situations to let him drive the bus. In today's game, the quarterback's got to drive the bus.
Yep. if you want to be successful.
Right. No question about it.
Stage. Absolutely. Tyler Evans, can you guys tell me more about Al Washington and what you guys think we will see this upcoming season?
I mean, it's a little early for that, right, Vince? I mean, we've seen one practice. I can only tell you what we told you when he was hired, and that's what his reputation is. And what his reputation is a really good technical coach. He understands the game, he knows the game, and he can teach the game. And his players, for the most part, have had a lot of success. I mean, this past year at Ohio State, the linebackers weren't any good, but they were pretty good the 2 years before that. You know, the linebackers in 2018, which I'm still confused on what part of that he coached at Michigan, because it was him and Greg Madison. It was just strange the way that situation was aligned. You know, were really good. And then in 2016 at Boston College, Harold Landry and Zach Allen were monsters. And Harold Landry had like 23 and a half tackles for loss and 16 sacks with Al Washington coaching him. So he comes with a reputation as a very good technical coach, a guy that believes in building relationships and connections with players beyond just football, and a good recruiter. Now, we really haven't had a chance to see any of that in person, Tyler. So I'm not ducking your question. It's just that I can only tell you what his reputation was because we haven't really seen him in action. Now, we'll have Ryan and Sean will be at and Vince will be at the practice on Saturday. We'll get to see more of Coach Washington, but we've seen him one time, and all they did was kind of go through some indie stuff. Mm-hmm. And it would be unfair of us to make an impression of him based on that, good or bad. I mean, he's out there killing it. Like with Chancey Stuckey, we talked about what Coach Stuckey did in practice, and we loved it. Still just one practice. If we're not seeing that by practice 15, then it doesn't matter if they did in the opener, right? If they stop doing it, then it doesn't matter. But, you know, I liked the things that I saw on the video of the first practice. You know, they were working on combos and twists and using their hands and things like that. And it all kind of fit with what we've heard about him. But we need to see more of it. And more importantly, we need to see his players show it on the field. Because ultimately that's truly what matters at the end of the day. That's all that matters at the end of the day.
RFN attaboy. RFN attaboy? I think I'm saying that right. Anyway, the board is the best bang for your buck. So I had to get that out there.
I appreciate that. I tend to agree.
Yeah.
I tend to agree with that. Yes. Ian Nobble, thanks for the super chat. Ian, did you guys watch the hockey game last night? I did not.
Negative.
I had like a little kind of a date night with my wife. We went to Bed Bath and Beyond and kind of hung out, and then I had to get caught up on work.
Maybe
just a typical. It's a great set. You know, I might go to Home Depot. I don't know if I have enough time. Yeah.
Well played.
Yeah.
Well played. I actually had late practice because we're indoors, and so I had practice and I did not watch.
I honestly haven't watched any of the hocky team this year. I know they're good again, which I love. I just haven't had time to.
They're in the Elite Eight, just like that. So they play again tomorrow.
Did they beat North Dakota last night?
Yeah, they did 2-1
okay, awesome.
in overtime. They had
I did see on Twitter there's like a controversy at the end of the game, like they had a goal and it got negated or something like that.
Yeah,
but
they had the game-winning goal at the end of regulation. It got overturned, and they went to overtime and still won. So
that's awesome.
Made it a null and void. Awesome. Didn't matter.
So they just got to win one more to get to the Final Four? Is it one of those you got to win 2 out of 3 things, or
one more?
Okay. It's not that till the championship game,
right? Okay. And even that, I think it's all one gamers. Okay. I think. But again, I'll show my ignorance to college hockey. But the Frozen Four, I know they got to win one more game to get to the Frozen Four. So I do know that much.
All right, let's get back on track.
I can do that. Q Kibbs, Vince, how is baseball? Still going to try to make it to a game. Might have to wear a Michigan shirt with our agreement. I tell you what, baseball is fantastic. The weather has been terrible. The first week we were all outside. It was glorious, and now it's been raining and terrible. So, it is what it is. So, but other than that, things have been fantastic. I invite everybody to come out to a game, and I'd be more than happy to have everybody out there. Another super chat from John Klimek. Thank you very much, John. In regards to you owe it to the players to develop them, how often do you believe that was used to recruit against Notre Dame, specifically quarterback and wide receiver?
Well, receiver not as effectively until recently, because at receiver, I mean, you got to remember Notre Dame's produced some really good receivers. I mean, Golden Tate was a second-round pick. Michael Floyd was a first-round pick. Will Fuller was a first-round pick. TJ Jones was drafted. Chase Claypool, Miles Boykin. I mean, they've had some guys drafted, but in recent years, it's not so much been the development, although that's stung a lot more the last couple of years. And they would use well, why did it take them till their senior year? I mean, teams would use that. And the fact that they didn't play when they were younger, teams would use that. Quarterback's been the one they've been crushing Notre Dame on. And there's nothing Notre Dame can do about it till they change it. And I wrote an article a couple months ago now, maybe it was a month ago, and I said a past, present, and potentially future Notre Dame quarterback have a chance to just completely change the trajectory of Notre Dame football. And what I meant by that, obviously, the past is Tommy Rees and his role now as the offensive coordinator coach. The present is Tyler Buchner, and the future would be Dante Moore.
It's a great
Tyler has to have success. Then Dante has to have success, because if just one guy has success, it can be more.
It's an outlier. Yeah.
Right. But if Tommy's able to turn Jack Coan and Ian Book, who were not highly ranked recruits, into NFL guys, and then Tyler becomes a dude, and then Dante becomes a dude, now all of a sudden it's like, okay, if you go play football at Notre Dame, you're going to get drafted as a quarterback. And if you're not a big-time player, you're still going to get drafted in the 4th or 5th round. But if you're a dude, you're going to be this.
Right.
And that's how the narrative changes. I mean, that's what that made it easier for Trevor Lawrence to pick Clemson, was Deshaun Watson's success. And then that came after, like, Taj Boyd. And, but they had Charlie Whitehurst. I mean, there were some quarterbacks that had NFL success. But when Taj did what he did as a not an NFL guy, but had great success, and then Deshaun, who is more of an NFL talent, did what he did. It was like, for Trevor, it was a no-brainer. Well, yeah, of course I'm going to go there. Right. So I think that's going to be a big part of that conversation. Vince, before you go, I'm trying to find, where were we when you left off? Do you remember where we were?
12:38.
Okay, awesome.
Yep.
Okay.
I'm actually going to pull this one up. So
okay. Sounds good. Appreciate it.
Right back to where we are. Rob Osgood. Hey, guys, just joined the IB chat room. Welcome, Rob. Welcome to the family. Welcome to the family. He says, in your opinion, with the new coaches in place, do you think the recruiting of the 24 class reaches greater heights? I know 23 isn't done yet. No Kelly anymore.
That's a good one, Rob. I mean, I think this 23 class, especially if they look, remember earlier I was asked about who I think the next 3 commits might be. And it's funny, I was having this conversation last night with somebody, and it was like, if Notre Dame gets Dante Moore, I believe they'll compete for our number 1 class. I do. Because not just because, look, you need 5-star recruits to finish number 1 in the ranking system. We're talking about the ranking system, right?
Yeah.
And so you need that. And I think practically you need a great quarterback to be number 1, because of the way college football is now. If you don't have a quarterback, you can't be a great team. So you need that great quarterback, number 1. But I also think that, as I've said for months, Dante Moore is a Pied Piper type of recruit. And you're already sitting at number 1. What's hurting, like, remember the Blake Fisher class? Well, Tyler Buchner was sitting at number 1 for a while, really early in the process. But that was after like 5 or 6 kids had committed, and you kind of looked at the board and you're like, there aren't a whole lot of dudes like left on the board that are going to help keep you there. Right. You look at the board now and you're like, they're number 1 right now, but there's a lot of dudes on this board that are going to help keep you there. Dante Moore's a 5-star. Cardinal Tate's a 5-star. Braylon James is a top 100 guy. Ronnie Gallagher's a top 100 guy. Jane Greathouse is a borderline top 100 guy. Samson Okunlola's a top 100 guy. Monroe Freeling's a top 100 guy. Charles Jagasol's a top 100 guy. Sullivan Absher's a 4-star player. Jason Moore is a top 50 guy. I mean, I go on, and Samuel Mpemba, Jaden Osbury, both top 50 guys. I could go on and on and on about these highly ranked guys that Notre Dame is, if they're not the leader for, they're at least in the top 3 for, which is where you want to be. But you got to close on them, and it's easier to close on them and have, if you have Dante Moore, because now it's like, okay, now you got a dude. Right. Now all the things you tell me, I know, because look, elite players at receiver are not going to go to school if they don't think they got a quarterback. And although me and Vince both think, and Ryan and Sean both, I think Ryan does, I'm not sure about Sean, I think Sean does too. We all think Tyler Buchner can be that guy. He hasn't proven it yet. Right. And because he didn't play his senior year of high school and his rankings dropped, he's not perceived by other recruits as the guy that we think he can be.
Right.
So he doesn't have that same kind of impact. And so it's very important that you get that guy. If they get that guy, then 23 will finish that high. I don't know if 24 can be that for 2 reasons. One is what I just said. Number 2, because I don't know if they can be number 1 back-to-back years, right? Number two, it's not as good of a year in the North as so far as it is this year. I mean, that's the thing is Notre Dame could potentially get 2 top 100 receivers that are well above the Mason-Dixon line, and Cardinal Tate and Ronnie Gallagher. We've talked about the number of top 4-star kids in Massachusetts. Dante Moore being a 5-star quarterback from 2.5 hours away, right? Like there's a lot of guys, Drake Bowen being a top 50 player from your own state. That guy doesn't exist in next year's class as far as we know that we've seen so far. So I think those factors to me, I don't know if 24 can be as good, but it doesn't have to be as good. It just has to be outstanding again. If you start stringing together 22 and what we think 23 can be, 22 wasn't an elite class in regards of being top 5, but it was really good. If you give me 22 and 23 and 21, really, when you think about Buckner and Fisher and those kind of guys, if you can string those type of 3-year stretches together where you have like that one elite class and then 2 really good classes, that's where Notre Dame needs to be to kind of beat, hey, look, you can contend and beat these teams. And then the more success that breeds on field, then the more and more success it breeds off the field in recruiting. And I think those two things kind of tie together. So great question. Great question.
Just your ordinary Joe. Given that Notre Dame football is year-round, you're not wrong, when do you consider the punctuation mark separating one year from the next? Is it bowl game, blue and gold game, summer camp? He said summer camp twice, or the bowl game itself. I see. He was saying in between each one of those things that he listed. Okay. Right. For me, it's once the bowl game is completed. I mean, that's when you really turn the page, I think, to next year, because once you start doing winter conditioning and all of that, getting ready for spring, that's the new team. Like that's the new group, even though it's the same, school year, that's the new team. Because a lot of times those seniors go off and they start doing draft prep, or, they're just worried about getting graduation situation taken care of or whatever. They're not necessarily working out with the team. They might still work out at the facility, but they're not really working out with the team anymore. So it's after that bowl game, that's when you really turn the page, I think, to next year, and you start thinking about what it's going to look like.
I think it's a combination of a couple different events around the same time. It's the bowl game combined with, like, once the bowl game's complete, once winter conditioning starts, plus whenever all the players have made their final decisions about going pro.
Sure.
I think to me, once Jarrett Patterson made his decision, it was like, okay, time to move on to the 2023-22 team, right? So the bowl game to me is kind of between the bowl game and summer work or winter workouts. There's that weird time where you're not quite sure what the team is going to look like. Coaches are leaving. Usually you're going to lose a coach or two.
Hired.
Guys are going to be drafted, determine whether they're going to go to the draft. It's not really till winter workouts start that you're like, okay, now I know what my team has looked like. And the first winter workout is your first official time of, hey, this is what our football team is going to look like. So to me, that is what separates one year for the next. But the official kickoff of, okay, now this is who we are, is in the summer when the freshmen enroll.
Show up, sure.
Right. So the new season starts in winter workouts, but it doesn't really officially like, okay, now we know what the team is going to be until you get to the summer.
That's a good point.
That's kind of, but the previous season is over the minute the bowl game is over.
Right.
The previous year's like the final thing ticks off, unless you're going to have a visit at the White House, right? I think we all know what that means.
Yeah,
right. Then your season is not over. I mean, is over at that end of that bowl game. But it doesn't start. So it's not like, to me, Vince, there's not a start where it stops and then immediately starts for next year. I think there's that gray area between the end of the bowl game and the beginning of winter workouts that you're kind of in a sort of no man's land kind of thing, because you don't know what your team is going to look like coaching wise, player wise, and all that kind of stuff. So that would be my answer to the question.
Brian Jones, recruiting related, how much attention gets paid to the kids at the summer football camps? Asking for a friend with a kid attending.
Well, I'll be honest with you. I mean, a lot of those camps are for just younger kids and Notre Dame fans and to make money. But I'll say this, Notre Dame coaches are always recruiting. And you're going to go into a young guy camp and just be like, hey, we're out here. And I think for coaches, those are really relaxing times because there isn't the stress of, I got to impress these people. And you can just go coach. And I'm just going to work with these little kids and work with these young kids, 8th, 9th, 10th graders and stuff like that without the stress of the recruiting process. So I think you're actually going to get better coaching at those. I mean, more into, whereas if you go to like a more older camp, they're mainly going to be focusing on the recruited guys at that point in time. So, that's kind of the thing for me. But if from a recruiting standpoint, I don't think those things have a whole lot to do with being recruited. What we would find is, so like when I was coaching D3 and 1AA, I would work camps at like summer camps at like Bowling Green and used to work the Maryland camp a lot because that's where we would find kids. And again, we're more looking for like juniors and rising juniors and rising seniors. But, I just, camps aren't what they used to be because you now have if you're being recruited, you're going to be at like Irish Invasion. You're going to be at the lineman camp. You're going to be at some of the invite camps is really where you're going to, be. So I'm going to have to kind of pull these. I'm going to stay and keep answering questions because we have a lot of great questions and Vince is gone and Ryan is at the pro day today. So he's covering the pro day. We have live updates and things like that going on of the pro day as we're going through right now. So that's where they are. And that's why it's just me for the rest of the show today. So I'm going to go through and try to get to as many questions of these as I can. So please just bear with me. Okay, here we go. Notre Dame 2164. So I can't get the Ohio State Michigan State game from last year out of my head. I'm starting to worry about the Ohio State receiving core, passing game slicing up our secondary. Am I way more worried than I should be? Look, I don't think you shouldn't be worried about that game. I mean, Ohio State's a very good football team. I think the concern I have is I don't think the Michigan State game has anything to do with it. I think Michigan State last year had a terrible pass defense. And so, Notre Dame didn't have a great, even with as bad as they were last year, Notre Dame gave up 224.2 passing yards per game. That ranked 63rd. Their passer ranking, despite, again, even with that bad game, they were 25th in passer rating. In yards per attempt, they were 30th. If you go look at Michigan State ranked dead last in college football in passing yards allowed per game, 324.8. They averaged over 100 yards allowed more per game than Notre Dame did. That was really, really bad. And if you look at their passer rating numbers, again, Notre Dame was 25th. Michigan State was 86th. If you look at yards per attempt, Notre Dame, as I said, was 30th. Michigan State was 60th. So Notre Dame was significantly better in every category last year than Michigan State was. And if you look, for example, at the pass defense against the teams that they had in common, the opponents they had in common, I believe the only opponent that they had in common last year was Purdue, correct? And Purdue Purdue scored 40 points on Michigan State. They completed 74.1% of their passes for 536 yards, 9.9 yards per attempt, 3 touchdowns, no picks, and a 175.78 rating. Against Notre Dame, Purdue's off quarterbacks completed 66.7% of their passes, significantly lower, for 291 yards per pass. That was 5.4 yards per attempt, right? Compared to 9.9. 1 touchdown, 2 picks, and a passer rating of 110.64. Again, compare that to the 170 that they had against Michigan State. So I don't think it's comparable, to be honest with you. I mean, Notre Dame held Purdue to their lowest. I'm looking at it now, their lowest rating of the year, right? They held Purdue to their second lowest yards per attempt of the year. Only Nebraska held them to lower, and held them to one of their fourth lowest yards per attempt or completion percentage on the season. And so, I mean, Notre Dame had success against them. Michigan State didn't. The point being, Michigan State stinks. Michigan State, like I said, gave up 536 yards to Purdue. So I don't think your concern shouldn't be based off of the Michigan State game. Your concern should be based off of what we saw from Notre Dame's secondary last year against the better passing teams on the schedule. Also, I think Ohio State's second receiving core is going to still be very good. and obviously they have a very good quarterback, but the receiving core is not going to be quite as good as it was last year. Still really good, but you lose Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave. That's they're still going to be really good. There's a level of plug and play there, but nobody that they're going to have is as good as Garrett Wilson was, in my opinion. So you should be worried about it. It's going to be the matchup that determines the game. Basically, is Notre Dame's pass defense, which includes pass rush, against Ohio State's pass offense. But I don't think the Michigan State game has anything to do with it, because Michigan State's pass defense sucked, if we're being honest about it. And I just don't think it has any bearing whatsoever. I mean, it just doesn't. All right. Josh Popard is able to join us today. I'm finally able to catch a live show for the first time and be able to interact. Love the show and content. Thanks, guys. Go Irish. Glad that you are with us today very much. Douglas Road Roundabouts asks, Brian, you mentioned on the board Notre Dame rolling out the red carpet for Dante Moore next week. What does that look like from a practical nuts and bolts perspective? How's that different from other visits? Well, number one, I believe he's going to be the only guy on campus, or very, very limited number, which means all your attention is on him. It means you're going to, from the moment he steps foot on campus, you've got people there, you've got coaches there meeting him, you've got everybody there kind of, showing him the love the minute he gets there. It's anything that that he values. So, Dante wants to major in such and such. You make sure that he's there to meet with the main person of that department. It's having the players around him, having, recruits that texting them during the visit, the commits text him during the visit. It's about sitting down with him and letting him know the vision that you have for him, and just reiterating, hey, here's why we need you. It's just about reminding him of how important he is to the future of this program, and how important he can be to putting together an elite class. It's kind of like, do you want to go somewhere else and just, do great things, but just kind of, be a great player, whatever, or do you want to come here and be a legend? And I think that's kind of the opportunity when you're the quarterback at Notre Dame. If you have any kind of, think about how Ian Book is viewed by a lot of Notre Dame fans, and he was just okay. Imagine if a guy like Dante Moore and Tyler Buckner are able to have success that I think they're capable of, and how they're going to be viewed. I think that's really, really important. Irish 0687, can you expand on Marcus Freeman's comment about Golden bringing a lot of different situational tools and how that might look with personnel rotations, recruiting, what we can look for in game? Okay, it's a really good question. So we have said before in the show that the NFL is much more of situational football. And what that means is you really are going to rotate. I think I heard this was like 3-4 years ago. I don't know if how much it's changed now. I'm sure it's changed a little bit, but something like NFL teams are in their sub packages like 60% of the game. So you have different sub packages, and depending on how expansive you want to get with those, it could get real in detail. You could have a package that changes when the offense changes personnel. So like if they're an 11 personnel team and they go to 12 personnel, you have a package for that. We've seen this from Coach Freeman. A great example is the bowl game that they had when he was at Cincinnati against Georgia, where every time Georgia, Cincinnati was a 3-3-5 personnel team. Every time Georgia went to 12 personnel, so they'd bring a second or third 12 or 13 personnel, so they'd bring a second or a third tight end in the game. Cincinnati would immediately switch to a 4-3 personnel. Now, the way the rule is now, you can do that more effectively, because if the offense, because of tempo, they created a rule, and I'm sure most of you are aware of this, where if the offense subs personnel, the officials stand over the ball and let the defense substitute. So even a team that's sort of going fast, if they change a player, you have a chance to change your personnel. So you say, here's our 11 personnel package, here's our 12 personnel package, here's our 20 personnel package. You're going to have third down packages. You may have a difference between a third and short package or a third and long package. You may have a red zone package. You may have a coming out package. You may have a 2-minute package. Package meaning personnel. Now, there are going to be calls within that personnel, but that's really what he's referring to, is the personnel plus the calls that relate to what each team is doing. And so you're going to constantly be rotating. So we saw this last year, for example. Every time Notre Dame got into a third and beyond 3 or 4, they brought in a third down package, which was sub personnel. You'd see Jason Adamiola, you'd see Justin Adamiola, you'd see Isaiah Foskey, And at times you see Myron Tungvaloa, but you basically have like 3 defensive ends on the field, sometimes 4. And then you'd see Bo Bauer come in and kind of play that Mike linebacker spot. And a lot of times you see Drew White go out, and then they'd bring in a nickel, right? A nickel cover guy, or sometimes even a dime, which is 6 defensive backs. So that was their third down package. And so because Al Golden comes so much from the NFL, which uses so much different situational football, that's, I think, where he's referring to how Coach Golden is going to bring that to the table. And he's going to be able to have, hey, if they do this, we're doing this. If they do that, we're doing that. That's just part of who he is. The key is going to be, can you teach it to your players? You may have all these great packages, but can your players execute all those great packages? I think that's going to be the bigger question mark. And that's always a question mark for any coach. I mean, that's not something unique to Al Golden. It's just as long as you can teach it and they can do it, it's just how much volume to give your players, as much as they can handle, to where they can be very high execution players with everything that you put in. And if that means you can only have 10 concepts, then you run 10 concepts. If that means you can have 30 concepts, then you have 30 concepts. It has to be determined by what your players can handle. And I think that, to me, is where I would be. Here's a 2-part question from AJ. Number 1, before the 3-9 disaster, how would you compare your excitement for the program coming off back-to-back 10-win seasons and where recruiting was, Jimmy Clausen's class, etc., to now coming off an 11-win season where recruiting is and can potentially be at the chips fall in the right place with Dante Moore? I'll be honest with you, I was more excited then, more excited then. I'm more confident in that this group is going to be better. So if your question specifically was my excitement level then was higher for a couple reasons. Number 1, I was younger. In 2005 and 2006, I was in my 20s. I wasn't really covering the team. I was just a fan. And so my excitement was different. You had the really bitter taste of the Ty Willingham and the Bob Davie era in your mouth. And people my age it was still close enough in time to the 93 season and the 88 to 93 run that it had been a while, but you could still remember it. And so when you saw what Coach Weiss was able to do in his first 2 years, it brought some excitement. Like, okay, you're back. And then you go out and land a 5-star quarterback, and you land Duval Kamara, and you land Golden Tate, you land Armando Allen, you land Robert Hughes, you land some really good players in that 2007 class. And all of a sudden it's like, wow, like they're going to keep this going. But even at the time, in the back of my mind, I was still a little nervous. And the reason I was nervous is because the recruiting had been so bad in the previous years that you wondered how bad it would get. And I still had optimism, and I'm like, I think they can go 9-3 and all this. Cause you're like, if everything goes right, this is going to happen. But they were relying on so many young players that weren't just, when I say young players, I'm talking like freshmen, that you just look at it and say, boy, if Jimmy doesn't pan out, the quarterback situation's a mess. If the receivers don't pan out, the freshman receivers, then it's a mess. And that was kind of not really where you wanted to be. And even though that class itself ended up being pretty good, it just didn't have enough help, to be honest with you. And that class produced, Duval Kamara was a big time recruit at the time. You had Golden Tate, you had Harrison Smith in that class, Gary Gray, Kerry Neal, Ian Williams, Brian Smith, Matt Romine, Taylor Dever, who started for a couple years. You had Jimmy Clausen, Robert Hughes, Armando Allen, Mike Ragone. There was a lot of big time players in that class. And so there was a lot of excitement, but as a fan, but as my coach and me was like, those last few classes were really bad, and you're losing a lot of players from the 06 team. And so with this, I'm not as excited because my role is different. And so that's where the lack of excitement comes from. It's not that I'm not excited. Is the fan in me is excited, but it has to be tempered by the analyst and the professional, and you have to kind of focus on it with maybe a little bit more of a critical eye. But the reason I'm more confident that this team is going to continue the success and build on it is because the foundation is better, right? The overall, there's still some areas where Notre Dame's got to get better talent-wise. They got to get better in the secondary. Even the D line, as good as I think it can be this year, it's like if Foskey or Adamiola are out of the equation, there's just a little different deal, And so those are the areas where you say, look, there's still areas to get better, but the foundation is much stronger because of the work that even going back to like Chip Long and Clark Lee to a degree, Mike Elston to a degree, Tommy Reese, Marcus Freeman, a lot of these coaches that are here, the foundation they were able to put together is stronger to where you're closer. And then obviously Notre Dame's been able to have on-field success, which helps. So I think that to me is you don't have but this group is going to be playing with some really bad classes, which is what was true of the 07. Because if you remember, even though they went 3-9 that year, they still had the number 2 recruiting class in the country in 08. And the 08 class was even better than the 07 class. Had a second straight 5-star quarterback in Dane Chris. You had Michael Floyd. You had Deion Walker. You had Kyle Rudolph. I mean, that 08 class was nasty. Darius Fleming, Steve Filer, Dan McCarthy, Jamore Slaughter, I think was part of that 08 class. I mean, it was a tremendous – Capron Lewis Moore was part of that class, and I believe in 08. It was a great class, but it was just, again, the foundation wasn't strong. And I think that's the last piece is I always had concerns about Charlie's staff. I always had concerns about John Latina as the O-line coach, and then Frank Verducci. I always had concerns about who he had hired as defensive coordinators, and those were some. I always complained about Rob Ianello as a receivers coach because he was just not a good receiver. He was a good recruiter, but not a good receivers coach. There was a couple coaches here and there that I liked, but a lot of coaches I was unsure of, and that was kind of my issue with Brian Kelly during a chunk of his tenure. I think the other part of my confidence level now, AJ, is that I look at it and I say, it's a situation where I feel like the staff is so much better now that I feel more comfortable that they're going to get the most out of guys than I have been in past years. So that's, again, where my confidence comes from, not so much excitement. I hope that answers your question, AJ. JJ Goodway, are you surprised that Notre Dame's media arm has put out so little practice clip content this spring? Seems like a lot less than we've had previously. There's no question. They've had 4 practices, and we've seen 1 or 2 tweets about it. It's a huge missed opportunity by Notre Dame. And I've said this before. If you don't want to let us in at practice, I understand. I don't like it. I think it's a slap in the face to fans because you're not giving them an opportunity to have, unbiased, objective analysis of your team. But a lot of teams are going in that direction, sadly. But if you're not going to allow us access and you want to then you need to be the ones to take it directly to the fans. And the fact that, like you said, they're not putting out highlight videos. And I mean, you can't see a lot from a lot of those highlight videos, but it gives the fans a taste, where it's like, clip this and put out these minute-long highlight things that you've done. They used to give us the year of COVID when we couldn't be there. They would give us 3 minutes of practice highlights that we could then use. Why stop doing that? I mean, I get not doing that on the practices where we're there, but when we're not there, why not put that out? Because that's for the fans. And I feel like it's just another example of Notre Dame not really caring about the people that make Notre Dame what it is. The reason Marcus Freeman makes the money he makes, the reason the people that work in Notre Dame make the money that they make, the reason there's going to be the NIL stuff matters is because of the fans. If there was no fan support for college football and for Notre Dame, then they would be Bowling Green. That's just the reality of it. It's the fan support that matters, and I don't think there's enough people at Notre Dame that appreciate that. They're like, well, we're who we are because of how great we are, and we want to be secretive or we want to control the narrative or whatever else, and so we're just not going to put stuff out. I think it's a huge missed opportunity. And the thing that sucks too is when Notre Dame's media team puts stuff out, it's almost always gold. It's great production and great quality, and like the video they put out about the night before camp started about championships. I mean, it was gold, and that's what stinks. And I just wish that they understood that better, but they don't. And because I thought when we got the schedules, we're only going to get 5 practices, and we're only going to get 1 full practice. I was annoyed by it, but I also was like, man, I bet you they're going to put out some really cool stuff, though. I bet you that's kind of part of the plan. We haven't seen it. I think it's a huge miss, in my opinion. Huge miss. Because it doesn't hurt me if they're not putting it out. Because it's not like, I'm reporting, putting it out like, hey, look at our content, right? It's their content. It's their opportunity to grow their channel and their networks and all that other kind of stuff. But more importantly, it's given back to the fans that invest so much time and energy and emotion and money into your program. And just, hey, just imagine if fans just boycotted a college football, right? Nobody went to games and nobody watched and all that kind of stuff. How different the interaction between players and coaches and the school and administration will be towards fans that next year. Be vastly different, obviously, because that's the only way they can survive. But I don't think there's too many people in college football now that don't understand that, in my opinion. And that's why I think fans more and more and more are getting crapped on. And it's not a good thing. It's not a good thing. Okay. Demetrius Rex, do you see Jack Coan as a future coach? No, I do not. I think Jack's going to be like in the business world, and I'm going to have him as part of like some kind of like he's the first person you meet when you come to my company because he's such a nice, sweet kid and he's smart. But I think a coach has to have a little bit more of a different mentality than Jack. But I think Jack's going to go be successful in the business world or something like that. All right, let's get down here to some more questions. Got a lot of talk about Ohio State. Rob Didoff, Brian and Vince, your thoughts if we would ever have a Shamrock series in the Rose Bowl? I wish they would. I really do. Now, I don't even know if I care about having a Shamrock series there. I just want to play in the Rose Bowl. I want to see them play again. It's been since 2007 since they played in the Rose Bowl. That was against UCLA. But I think that'd be pretty cool. Like if you're going to play, let's say you're going to have a Shamrock game out at the Rose Bowl, you don't play UCLA because it'd be stupid to have your home game be on their field. I think that'd be stupid. But go there and play Washington or play Oregon or play, some West Coast team, BYU, I don't care, but play some Pac-12 team, play Utah or something, but have the game be there. I think that'd be really cool. I'd be all about that. I'd be all about that. Okay. Let's get down to some more here. David Flores says, I noticed Jordan Patel was listed as a linebacker on the team's updated roster. What LB position do you see him playing? He's been listed as a linebacker for a while, and he's playing rover. Yeah, he is a rover for Notre Dame. Sparkling Swan, Brian and Vince, Notre Dame wins a title. How are you celebrating? Well, the problem with that is my hope is that if they win a title, I'm somewhere covering the game, and I can't really celebrate it at the time. I think after the game, I'd probably a lot of hugs, a lot of high fives. But at the moment, I couldn't really celebrate it. Now, if it's like now and I can't cover it because there's still stupid rules in place, and I'm in the stands, I'm going crazy, and I'm screaming and I'm high fiving and I'm hugging and hopefully crying with my dad. But as of right now, it would just be like, how would I celebrate? By start working on my game observations, right? By start working on my post game stuff, getting ready for the post game show. Stuff like that. So I promise you this, if Notre Dame wins a national championship, I promise you we will still have a post-game show afterwards. We absolutely will. Okay, here we go. Let's see here. Let's get down to trying to find some more questions. I don't know why we're having this debate going on here. It's kind of nuts. Okay, let's try this one. Anthony Oz. If Notre Dame opens the season in Columbus with a huge victory over the Ohio State University, then call me about the celebration. Hey, you know what? Sounds good to me. Let's see here. BRKR1 says, what do you think of the Chiefs potentially targeting Will Fuller as a cheaper replacement for Hill with huge upside if he can stay healthy? I thought that I had read that he was going to sign with the Browns, but it looks like he is. Is he still a free agent? Because I had read somewhere that the Browns were targeting him, so it does look like he's still a free agent. But I mean, I would certainly go after Will Fuller, and if he can stay healthy, him and Patrick Mahomes would be a phenomenal combination. But if you're the Chiefs, you got to be careful with how much you pay Will Fuller because, like you said, if he can stay healthy, he's yet to prove that he can do that in his career. Will Fuller's not had one healthy season in the NFL up at this point in time, and so I would do it. It's worth the risk if you can get it at the right price. That would be my thing. Is I would sign him to a very, and I don't know how this works cap wise, but I would try to sign him to a very low cap number salary with maybe a lot of incentives. I'm not quite sure how that works between what counts towards the cap and what doesn't and all that other kind of stuff. I don't follow the NFL close enough to know that, but if he isn't dead set on playing with the Chiefs or with the Browns and going to play with Deshaun Watson, then I would absolutely try to get him over there. There's no doubt about that. Let's get down to some more here. Bob's an idiot. Right, Brian? Are you and Ryan going to release a mock draft? Ryan and I actually have talked about that. He will be releasing a mock draft. So he will have one as we get closer to the draft. It's just still too early. Our thing is we don't, you guys know me. I don't get into the whole, okay, you're going to release a top 100 players as sophomores and you're going to have a mock draft right after, the season's over and we don't even know who's declaring yet, or you're going to release a top 25 like day after season. I don't love doing that stuff. We rarely do that stuff. Sometimes it's fun to do, but with like a mock draft, we're trying to look at it and like be really, as accurate as we can be with it. And so what Ryan and I talked about is we'll do it once all the combines are over and he can then say, okay, here's how the combine went. Here's how the pro days went. Here's what NFL teams are hearing. Here's the latest scuttlebutt, and then try to put together. So we're going to do 2 mock drafts. One I'm going to be a part of because it's more for fun. The one mock draft is going to be here's what we would do if we were the GMs of all these teams. Now, how we're going to do it, I don't know. We may do like a rotating thing with the staff. We may just here's mine. But then the other mock draft, sort of the official mock draft we're going to have is just going to be Ryan giving his best guess on what he thinks will happen based on, all his sources in the NFL and all those type of things. So that'll come out, I would say probably a couple weeks before the draft, maybe to a week before the draft. He might like re-release one like right before the draft. He and I are going to talk about that part, but we're definitely going to have at least those 2 that we discussed at the beginning of this. Ty B says, when should Marcus Freeman announce who's going to be quarterback 1? I don't really get into that. I've said this before. I don't care if he waits until Saturday morning before the Ohio State game to announce it. I don't care. I just care that the team knows. I mean, he doesn't have to tell us. They don't owe us an explanation on who the quarterback is going to be. I think the team knows. The team needs to know. Now, I don't have a problem if they announce it sooner. There's no reason that they shouldn't announce it sooner. I don't think it gives you the advantage that if everybody knows it's going to be this player and you still want to hold out for some advantage, I think you're overthinking it, and that's probably going to end up hurting you more than it's going to help you. But if you want to do that, okay, fine, do that. As long as the team knows, that's all I care about. I think that's the more important thing. The team's got to know who's our leader. Who's our leader going into that game, and it can't be Friday you announce it. I hope that one of the quarterbacks just kind of seizes hold and says, this is my job before that point. Because you want to at least have a couple weeks of knowing who your quarterback is going to be. I'm going to try to get to some more here. Drew St. Blaise, been a while, Drew. Hey, Coach D and Vincenzo. Got a second to watch the Friday Mailbag show for the first time in a while. It's my birthday, but wasn't able to throw a super chat to you guys because I have a Visa gift card. You don't have to throw a super chats, man. Happy birthday to you, Drew. Hope it's a phenomenal day here. And I know you're a local, so I hope you enjoy this. Sun is out right now in South Bend, which is phenomenal. So I hope you have a phenomenal day and happy birthday to you. Let's get to this here. All right, Bayside Tigers. I can't join live, but you guys are awesome. Thank you, Bayside Tiger 6. How do you think Marcus Freeman will do in terms of balancing his popularity among players so far, yet maintaining a structured and disciplined program? I think those things go together. I don't think his popularity comes from him being cool and hip and all those kind of things and young, and he has to somehow, like, when it's practice time, you got to tighten the thing up and you got to turn on a different. That's just who he is, and he's always been about structure and discipline and do things the right way. And he's someone who puts a lot of that. Hey, look, this is what the standard is, and I'm asking you to hold each other accountable to that. And so I don't think that changes. I think the mistake the coaches make is when they are not themselves. And Marcus Freeman has to be himself. And part of the reason he's so popular with his players and people that cover the team, and even like people in the media, like myself and others, it's like, I don't know if Marcus Freeman is going to be a successful head coach or not. But one of the things I've respected about him really from the beginning is he's a genuine guy. Like, you just feel like when he speaks, you honestly feel like that's some version of the truth. Right now, sometimes you can't share everything with the media. It's not everything is our business. There may be something going on like, hey, we're going to handle this behind closed doors, but I don't feel like I'm just being flat lied to about things. And I feel like the care for his players is genuine. They know he has their back. And having a kid's back is not always like being cool and hip and friendly. And that's not what a player's coach really is. If it's used in a pejorative, then that's what it means. But a real player's coach, one that is the kind that you want to embrace, is someone who says, hey, I love you. I've got your back. And I'm going to do everything I can to make you be the best version of yourself that you can be as a man, as a student, as a football player. And players want to hear that. But they also understand that doesn't come easy. That doesn't come cheap. That doesn't come without work. That doesn't come without blood. It doesn't come without sweat. It doesn't come without tears. And it doesn't come out with me holding you to that standard. And if I'm kind of not willing to hold you to that standard because I don't want to hurt your feelings, then I'm doing you a disservice. And most great players don't want that. They want to be pushed. They want to be challenged. They want to be ridden as hard as they can, as long as they know that in the end, you've got their back. And people have always asked, like, how is Harry Hiestand so liked by his players when he's as hard on them as he is? Because of what I just said. They know why he's that way. They know that he has their back. They know that he's doing that. That's his way. That's what he knows of getting the most out of me. And if I listen to him and I do what he's asking me to do and I ignore the curses or whatever else, then I know he's going to make me the best version of myself I can be, because Coach Hiestand didn't just care about football. The football lessons were meant to also bleed into the rest of his life. Little things like, so his past players, even when he wasn't, so this is what I was told this past year with some of the players that have come out since he left Notre Dame and left the NFL, because he hasn't been in the NFL since 19? He would write handwritten letters and send them to every single NFL team on behalf of the guys he coached at Notre Dame. That there's nothing in it for him at that point in time. He's not coaching anymore. And at the time, he was kind of leaning towards not coaching anymore. He did it because he cares and loves them. He shows it differently than somebody else will. And so I think that you structure and discipline is just a part of who you are. And kids he's not going to be unpopular because of he's that way. He's popular because he's that way. He's always been that way. And I don't think he needs to change that. If he starts changing it to kind of the other way, then that's a problem. If he starts changing it to be like too disciplined, and when I mean too disciplined, it's not about the expectations. Standards should be high. It's about, I got to come out here and I'm the head coach now, so I got to lay down the law. If that's not who you are, then don't be that guy. It's the expectation. Because look, it could be like, hey, look, this is standard. You don't live up to standard. I'm not yell at you. I'm not going to get in your face. But you're third team now. So, I mean, we told you the expectations are. There's a whole lot of different ways to get that point across. And I have confidence that Coach Freeman is going to do that. Now, will he be able to push all the right buttons as head coach? I don't know. We'll find that out. I really don't know. Blaine Tiller asks, our area with more room for growth and development this year versus last, cornerback or receiver? In which do you expect to see more of it this year? Blaine, that's a really good question. I would say that my answer is receiver on both. I think they have more room for growth and development because I think they were not coached well. And I think that the coaching is going to allow them to really take off. I think that at this point in time with the receivers, the talent is really good. The concern at corner, and the reason we have the concerns we have at corner is I don't know that the talent is as good as it is at receiver. I think Clarence Lewis has coached well. I think Mike Mickens has done a good coaching job. I don't think Mike Mickens has had very good players in some spots. I think he's done well. I mean, look at what he did with Nick McLeod. Look what he did with Cam Hart this year, taking a kid who's a converted receiver and turning him into a really good cornerback. Getting Clarence Lewis ready to play in his first 2 years was a coaching accomplishment because Clarence was a guy that was going to need some time before he was going to be physically ready to really play at a high level. The problem is he just doesn't have real good players. With all due respect, Clarence Lewis, he's just not as good as the kids at receiver, in my opinion. I just, until he proves me wrong. And so, I think that's one of those things where that's why I think receiver would be my answer. I think that the corner at some spots, I have questions about the talent. Like, I have very high on Ryan Barnes, but he's got a lot to prove, right? Whereas at least Lorenzo Styles and some of those guys, they played. We've seen them out on the college football, but we don't even see anything from Ryan Barnes yet, or Philip Riley, or Joe or Chance Tucker. And we've got to really see that. That's going to be a big thing. We've got to really see that. Brian's facial hair. Some of y'all in your obsession with my facial hair. Will there be a Saturday show? There will be a Saturday show. We're not quite sure what the form, like the time is going to be, but so Vince will be there, but I don't know if Vince can be part of the show because he's going to be at practice. But Ryan and Sean will be at practice. So whenever they're able to kind of get back to their hotels and we kind of do our work, we will do a show. So that's why you have to be subscribed. That's why you have to hit the notification bell, because we'll give you at least a 30-minute heads up on, hey, we're going to go live at such and such time, and you've got 30 minutes to get there, and you'll get that notification. If you're not subscribed, if you don't hit the notification bell, then you may not know that we're going to see it. So I think you need to be subscribed to that. Okay. Get down to here some more. Lucas Strittmatter asks, Coach D, how's your mom doing with her pneumonia? Thank you for asking that, Lucas. I think the pneumonia kind of got whooped pretty much right away. So for right now, she's still kind of battling back from the surgery she had. So for those that don't know, my mom recently was in surgery and in the hospital, had a surgery. I went home for that. And before she left the hospital, she just really felt bad. And it wasn't like the pain, but she felt like in her lungs, she could hear it. She could feel it. She told the nurse, I think I have pneumonia. And the nurse was like, oh, you're fine. You're good to go. And so mom gets home and she was like coughing really bad. Well, she just had surgery like on her whole insides. You cannot be coughing. And that's a really bad thing. So she called the doctor. They got her immediately in for an appointment back at the hospital. I had to take her back to the hospital. And lo and behold, she had pneumonia. So it was, I believe, a bacterial pneumonia. So they gave her antibiotics and stuff right away. And that day, her cough kind of went away and she was much better. So I think they caught it quickly. And because, viral bacteria or viral pneumonia, I don't believe you can really treat at all. I think you can just try to work with the symptoms, but I believe it was a bacterial pneumonia. I think I'm correct there. If there's doctors and such that say I'm incorrect on that, please let me know. But I believe that's what they were telling us, and they were able to give her an antibiotic to treat it, and it had immediate success. So that was a positive. So the pneumonia hasn't really been a problem since the couple days afterwards. It's just the recovery from the major surgery. I mean, she's 65. So, I mean, needed 3 surgeons in 4.5 hours to do that surgery. So it's going to take some time to get her back on track. But I appreciate you thinking about her, and anyone continued prayers is certainly much appreciated. We have a super chat from Chief Brody. If you are Marcus Freeman, what's the game plan week 1 at the shoe? Chief, this is going to sound like a cop-out, so I'm going to explain why I'm giving you the answer, not just say the answer and then, leave it at that. It's too early for that. And here's why it's too early and why I'm not thinking about my game plan. I'm trying to teach the offensive linemen how to play football. I'm trying to teach the receivers how to play football. I don't know. We don't, if I'm looking at this from Marcus Freeman's standpoint, right? Like, so when I say we, I'm talking about, like, if I'm Marcus Freeman, here's why I'm not worried about the game plan for week 1. I don't know who my quarterback's going to be. I don't know. My receivers are still learning the basics. My O-line's still learning the basics. I don't have Isaiah Foskey full strength. I don't have Cam Hart full strength. I don't have Jason Adamiola at all. I'm trying to get Maris Luafau back in shape. I got to figure out what my depth's going to look like on the D-line. We got to figure out what's going on with our cornerback position. Brandon Joseph's only had 4 practices in a Notre Dame uniform. I've heard from sources he's looked really good so far, but he's 4 practices in. Right now, your focus is about, I'm trying to see what I have. We're trying to see who we're going to be. I'm not, and you're 4 practices into your install into what your defense is going to look like. So it is way, way too early. And the reason that you say, well, what would you do if there's no ifs? Because until I really know what my strengths are, how good is my line really going to be? How much can I depend on them going into that game? I don't know the answer to that yet. And part of it is, who's my quarterback going to be? And where is his game evolved? Tyler Buckner and Drew Pine's game is going to grow so much, or hopefully it's going to grow so much from practice 4 of the spring to practice 20 of fall camp, which is going to kind of lead him into the prep work for the Ohio State game. So there's just so much unknown about who your football team is. Like, where am I going to play? You don't have J.D. Bertrand either this spring, which is another part of it. So I've got to find out, what's my nickel package going to look like? What's my base defense going to look like? We're still trying to learn all those things about our team. And that's why at this point in time, I don't think you can really think about what your game plan is going to be. So it's a fair question. And I hope that I gave respect to the answer about, why you can't really focus on too much of that at this particular time. Jonathan Gabrick says, if you guys were the coach, would you try to run more packages and play with 2 running backs, with Tyree lined up a receiver and Diggs running back, just get more speed and explosive on the field? No, I'm not putting Chris Tyree a lot at a receiver. I'm not. Now, would I do 2 running back stuff? Yeah, I do a lot of two running back stuff. I would do 2 running back stuff at times with Diggs and Audric Estime. I think that can give you some packages in some certain situations. But yes, with the Tyree package, I will certainly use him, but I'm not lining him up a receiver. Look, Chris Tyree's a really good threat out of the backfield as a pass catcher. He's not Kyron Williams where you're just going to line him up in the slot and have him running a bunch of routes. That's not really his game. Now, are there things that you could do out of that package where you move him around and motion him and things like that? Yeah, absolutely. Put him out wide and motion him in the backfield, then use Logan Diggs is a lead blocker on certain things, put him in the backfield and then motion him outside. And then all the different variations of that. So I would certainly, John, I like where your head is at with that. I just don't think it's going to be a thing where you're just lining him up a receiver all the time and let him play receiver. If you line him up in the slot, he's still a running back. Now I'm going to throw him screens and things like that. But, there's so much that goes into being a receiver, getting off jam, beating press, how to work your climb, how to do all these kind of things that you'd have to teach him before he could kind of play a ton of reps as a slot. Where with Kyron Williams, because he played so much receiver in high school, he already knew that kind of stuff. And so you could use that, in my opinion, have some success. Jeff Salmon, that's a great question. Jeff Salmon, Brian, can you give some examples of negative recruiting Notre Dame faces and which schools use them? It's a good question, Jeff. So I know of one example that's happening now because it always happens. And one of the masters of this has for years been Larry Johnson at Ohio State. And he was this way at Penn State too. Larry Johnson is one of the guys that does the most negative recruiting against Notre Dame over the years. And it's a lot of times it's about the academic piece. He'll tell kids this is what I've been told over the years. He'll tell kids, you can't handle it. You don't want to deal with that academics, man. It's too hard and this other kind of stuff. And you don't want to deal with that. And we saw USC's previous staff used race a lot with Notre Dame. There's a lot of white kids on campus, too many white kids, you'll be uncomfortable there. All this kind of stuff. They used that against Notre Dame on a recruit, and it had success with it at first, but eventually Notre Dame was able to kind of show them some numbers and be like, that's a lie. And we're able to kind of convince them that player to come back in the class. But the weather is used a lot, and a lot of the Southern schools will use the weather and the academics piece a bunch. Though, you'll have coaches that we've talked about this before. Brian Smith and I have talked about this, where they'll say, "Look, man, it's too hard. Look, we're a good school too. You don't want to deal with that. It's too hard for you. This, that, and the other," and really convince kids that they can't handle it, and that disgusts me. And you see that a lot down south, and it's different coaches. Really that'll do it. But the interesting thing, I've said this before, is for most of my life, if Notre Dame is recruiting, let's say a kid's looking at Notre Dame, Florida, and Florida State. I don't know if it's true at this particular moment because I haven't really heard this because both of those teams aren't very good, especially Florida State. But the way it used to be is the two Florida schools, the coaches would gang up on Notre Dame because they would rather that kid go to one of them than to go to Notre Dame. That happened a lot. I mean, just it, and you can have Brian Smith on one time, and we could probably have a whole show about negative recruiting we've heard from kids over the years. But a lot of it has to do with the academics and the perception of the number of black students that are on campus compared to other schools, which if you really dive into the numbers, it's not really any different. And when so from a percentage standpoint, like the one school recently was like, well, there's only X number of black students on campus. And we have this month. Well, Notre Dame has 8,000 undergrads. That school had like 50,000 students. So even if Notre Dame had twice the percentage of that school, it's still going to be fewer number. Well, they gave the kid the number as opposed to the percentage. Well, the percentage, if I remember correctly, Notre Dame actually has a higher percentage. But the other thing that they do is Notre Dame has such a large international, relative to a lot of the state schools, has a large international student base. So they would only count like African-American students, and that they would say, not students that are from Africa and students from other places that are not white. And so they would take the numbers and they would twist them and make it look like Notre Dame is just like this all-white campus, and you come to our school and it's going to be all this diversity. And the numbers don't really support that the way that people say it. And so some kids hear it and it's just they take it as gospel. Most kids, especially now that Notre Dame's successful, they're able to kind of battle against that. And look, that's ultimately the big thing. When you have success, you can push back against that stuff. When you're not a very good team and kids start hearing about, the girls aren't pretty and the weather sucks and school's too hard, and it's, nobody looks like you is going to be on that school other than football players. That stuff can have an impact when a team's 8-5. Like, do I really want to do this? And that's why Coach Freeman made the point that, look, we've got to show kids that we can do all three of the things that are important to them. Number one, obviously, is academics. Number two, that you can compete for a championship. And number three, that we can develop you into a high draft pick. If you do that, then you're going to have success. And at the end of the day, that's really, really what it's about. Let's try to get down to here to some more questions here. Hey, and look, some of y'all, I see somebody complaining about us not getting our super chat being skipped. Well, we don't skip super chats. We're often way behind you guys. So if you put some up, we're not going to get to it for a while. So it's not about skipping super chats, and it's rarely ever intentional. So I do have a super chat here, speaking of, from John Klimek. John asks, thank you for the super chat, John. In regards to you owe it to the players to develop them, how often do you believe that was used to recruit against Notre Dame? Oh, I'm sorry, John. We actually did answer that question earlier. I forgot about that. So we're actually good there. Let's see here. Scott Gibbs, I just had to pull this up. I just scrolled by Coach Kelly's post-LSU practice press conference. I'm not trying to be mean, but it's so nice not having to listen to his voice anymore. I absolutely agree with you completely. Luke Kirkwood, is Prince going to be a dude? Prince Colley's referring to. He's got a chance. It's still kind of early. I think that he's got a lot he still has to prove. He's got to show that he can not just be athletic, but also be a productive football player. But he works hard. I think that's important. And he's a hard worker. He's a good short area athlete. I think that's important too. It's just about continuing to develop, and that's going to be the key for him. But the tools are there. There's no question that the tools are there for him to be successful. I was to pull this up from Keegan McLaughlin. This is important. Hit the like button. Appreciate all the great content, and message board is the best. Thank you, Keegan, for being a part of that. And I still got to look over that thing you sent me, Keegan. I apologize. I will do that today. No question about it. Let's see here. All right. Louis Dirkholz, question for Brian. Would you rather land Dante Moore or never eat a Built Bar again? Look, I mean, I'm going to have to say I'm going to have to land Dante Moore, but the beautiful thing is I don't have to make that decision. If they land Dante Moore, I can still eat Built Bars, but there's a lot of things I would give up for Notre Dame to land a 5-star quarterback. Yeah, I'd go on a permanent Lent during his career for Built Bars if that meant it. But the beautiful thing is I don't have to make that decision because that would not be an easy decision because I do love Built Bars. I did order the brownie batter puff the other day. I ordered a lot of those. Those are so good. There's no question about that. So I'm excited. I haven't got them yet, but I very much am excited to get to those. All right. Let's see here. I want to get to some more questions. A lot of discussion here. Here's one. Sean S. with a super chat. Thank you, Sean. My USC buddy tried to tell me their 2023 class would be better than Notre Dame's and all said and done. I laughed. Am I missing something? Well, it's kind of hard for them. I mean, look, the thing is USC only has, I think, 3 kids committed in the 2023 class. So it's kind of hard for me to say what they're going to be. You know, they've got some highly ranked guys. Malachi Nelson, obviously, is a 5-star. Makai Lemon is a top 250 kid. Zechariah Branch is a borderline 5-star guy, but they only have 3 guys. You know, and for Notre Dame, it's like if they get Dante Moore, Braylon James, and Carnell Tate, they match what USC has. And the question is, can USC put the complete class together that will allow them to have sort of the balanced class Notre Dame has? I think USC is going to have a top 10 class. The thing that's going to hurt them a little bit this year is, from what I can tell so far, it's not a great year out west. It's a good year, but it's not a great year. There's not quite as many high-level California kids as there has been in the past. So they're going to have to recruit a little bit national this year. And a lot of that's going to depend on how their season goes. I think they're going to have a really nice boost on recruiting during this offseason. It's kind of that honeymoon period for Lincoln Riley. And if he can follow that up with a really good season on the field, let's say they go 10-2 and have a couple big wins, then you're going to see him be able to kind of take that honeymoon is going to continue even 9-3, and they're going to be able to have a top 5 to 8 class for sure. I don't see them landing a top 3 class, which is where I think right now Notre Dame is going to be. But it will certainly be a boost for them if they're able to bring in that kind of class, assuming it's a balanced class. And I think that's going to be my question. And that was always my issue for Lincoln Riley at Oklahoma, is he ran really highly ranked classes that were built on a couple positions, quarterback, running back, receiver, and secondary. But they didn't recruit a ton of great D linemen. They get some guys, but not consistently. Offensive line was solid. Linebacker was hit or miss. So to me, that's going to be the thing. He's got to prove he can do that at USC. But if they have a great run, and let's say they're a top 5 class going into the season, and they kind of falter and go like 6-6 or 7-5 or 5-7, then I think you're going to see them miss some guys or lose some guys. So a lot of it's going to determine, Sean, by how their season goes. But I do expect them to have a top 10 class. If they don't have a top 10 class, I'll be surprised. It would mean that Lincoln Riley's doubling down on another year of transfers, which I don't think is the way you want to build your program. I think the only way he would focus on transfers next year like he did this year is if he has no intentions of staying at USC. And what I mean by that is using USC as a springboard to whatever NFL job he wants. Then you just hit the transfer portal as much as you can to try to win as many games as you can in a short period of time to use that to springboard to success. If he's serious about staying in college and staying at USC and building USC up, then he'll want to really focus on landing more high school kids. Because, Alabama gets transfers, but if you look at Alabama, they're still predominantly a high school development program. You got Jahmyr Gibbs, and they'll get, got Jamison Williams last year, and there's nothing wrong with that. Notre Dame's tried to get guys like that, with Nick McLeod and Jack Coan and players like, Brandon Joseph. But Alabama, Ohio State, Clemson are still develop your players programs. And Georgia's been that for the most part. Again, JT Daniels, they get their guys, but it's primarily to fill a hole that you have. They're still focusing on developing the kids they recruit. And I think that's always the best way to go, and even more important for a program like Notre Dame, who's not going to be able to tap into the undergraduate transfer market like some other programs are. Rob Thidoff says, Brian, follow-up question. What about a Shamrock Series in the old Cotton Bowl? Rob, if the Cotton Bowl was, I don't know if I've seen enough of it. I know they've played some games in it recently. I don't know if I've seen enough of it where I would say, hey, yeah, play there, because I don't want to have a Shamrock Series game in like an old rundown stadium. So I don't know how the stadium is, like how is the upkeep. If you were to tell me, hey, the Cotton Bowl, they've renovated, it looks great, and I'd say, yeah, sure. because I would much rather play a game outdoors in Texas than playing in Jerry World. That's just me personally. But if the stadium's run down, then you just play where the Cowboys play. So if the old Cotton Bowl, which is still an outdoor stadium, is the upkeep is really good, and locker rooms are good, and it's still a cool environment that you want to bring people to, then yeah, I would love to do it there. There's no question about it. Jay Montalbano. Hi, Brian. Are you most excited about this year's D or offense, and why? Offense is the one, because I think the offense has a chance to be really good. We've kind of seen the defense be good. I don't know if they're going to be capable of taking that next step with this unit. I don't know. We have to see. But even if they can't, and they're just still a top 15 group, that's pretty good, right? The question is do they have the offense to go out there and score with people? And that's what I'm excited about. I'm excited to see, Tyler Buckner develop, and the receivers develop, and the O-line develop. And a lot of it comes down to, Jay, and I'm gonna get proven right or wrong this season, and it's just the reality of it. I'm not afraid to say it. I mean, look, I'm gonna be wrong sometimes. I'm gonna be right a lot more than I'm wrong. But I've said for years that I think the talent on offense is much better than the production has been, and they should be a much better offense. And if the coaches are what I think they are, I've said, hey, this guy has no more excuses. Well, I have no more excuses. If the offensive line talent's what I think it is, then the offensive line should be a pretty good unit this year because they have a great coach. If Chancey Stuckey is what people are telling me he is, then if the talent is what I think it is, then the receiver should be pretty good this year. And so that's kind of where I look at it, why I'm really excited about what that group can do, because it's what's needed. And I'm hoping that they can kind of go out there and get it done. It'd be a lot of fun. Bobby Halfacre. I'm praying I see another championship in my lifetime. Go Irish. I think a lot of people are feeling the way that you are, especially a lot of the younger folks, and who haven't lived through it. Like Ryan Roberts, who's our recruiting guy. He was not alive the last time Notre Dame won a championship. So yeah, it's an interesting dynamic talking to fans who have experienced a championship and those who don't, and how they react to things a lot of times can be very, very different. Old Grim with a super chat. Thank you, Old Grim. It's been a while since we've heard from you, buddy. Good to hear. I take care of my 92-year-old mother, so I only listen and don't watch. My question is, since it's only March, when should we really start paying attention to who is going to be here? Well, I think as far as I think you're referring to recruiting, I mean, I think the way that it's going now is now. I mean, I think it's important now as they start ramping up a lot of these April visits, and obviously the 9 kids that are already in the class, you need to be focused on them. And I think a lot of things can change, but with the December signing period, it's 2 months up from when it was. With kids committing so early, it's still harder to flip a kid than it is to land him when he's uncommitted. It's still harder. It's not impossible, but it's still harder. So I think that it's a situation where, and I think that's where NIL is going to hurt Notre Dame. I think Notre Dame's still going to get the kids that they're still going to get top kids. I still think Notre Dame can recruit against anybody in this era of NIL if they can sell what they have effectively. It's going to be harder to flip a kid who's taken an NIL deal. It's going to be harder to flip him. And Notre Dame's had some success flipping some really good players. I think that's where you could get hurt. So that's why even more important why you got to land these kids the first time around. And so I think this next month is going to be super, super, super important. Let's see here. Michael Parks just has a comment. Harry Heastan is the man. I tend to agree with you on that. Okay, let's see here. Timothy Miller says, hi, Brian. I grew up playing football for South Bend Central and LaSalle in the 70s. Do you know if South Bend has any 4 or 5-star football players that Notre Dame might be interested in? I don't believe so this year, no. It's been a while since South Bend had a kid that was really a 4 or 5-star kid that Notre Dame was able to look at. I think the last 4-star kid I remember I could be wrong here, but the last one I remember was David Perkins, and that was a long time ago. Very long time ago. So, yeah, you're just not seeing as much, because I think David Perkins was after Braxton Cave, who's from the area. Braxton Cave was a 4-star kid from Mishawaka, but I can't remember any since then, to be honest with you. Okay, let's get down to some more here. We're getting close to the end, so appreciate everybody checking in with us. Andre Neely. I answered this earlier, Andre, but just reiterate now for people who maybe weren't on when we talked about. We will have a show tomorrow after the scrimmage. Don't know the time yet because I don't know what time the guys are going to get out of the scrimmage. We'll have some articles to put up and things like that. And I don't know if it's going to be like a full scrimmage. It's going to be a practice. I assume there'll be some scrimmaging, but not a ton because this is the first full padded practice. So that obviously is, but we will get together. That's why you have to be subscribed. That's why you have to have the notification bell because you'll get alerted when we are going to have, that day, when we're going to have that time. But it will be tomorrow, and we'll kind of play it by ear, just depend on what time practice is over, and what time the guys can get back to their homes/hotels, depending on who's going to be a part of it. So I think we got to all the questions here, and I think we are good. I think we're good here. So yes, great questions to everybody. Thank you all so much for being a part of our show today. It was a lot of fun. Remember, subscribe, boards.irishbreakdown.com. Check us out. You're going to love what we got going on there. Tons of intel, lots of discussion. The guys are putting up all their pro day stuff on there now. Well, obviously, all of our recruiting updates and all those things kind of go on there. $4.99 a month or $49.99 for a year. You Built Bar. If you sign up, if you never tried a Built Bar, I'm telling you, just try one. Use the promo code below. You can get 10% off your entire purchase. You won't regret it, right? I had my mother-in-law try some last week. She wasn't really feeling it. Had her try a Cherry Bar C, which is my favorite. She loved it. Next thing you know, I'm ordering her 3 boxes to have shipped to her house, right? So really, really great stuff. And, when there's promos or new flavors and stuff, I promise you I'll talk to you about them. Like I said, the brownie batter is one that I've been talking about for a little bit. I don't know if they have any left. I can actually quickly go look and see if they still have any on there, if they're still advertising it on their front page, and let you know. But I tried when I got it as part of like this ambassador pack that we get where they let us try stuff. Yeah, they're still selling the brownie batter puffs. They also have this yellow Chirps mini puffs, but I haven't tried that. To be honest with you, I don't think that I will. But the brownie batter puffs, they've got a new banana nut bread puff out that I have not tried, but I will definitely be trying that because I love banana nut bread. And I didn't think I was going to like the puffs because I don't really like the marshmallow candies, or like, I was talking about this with my mom, like the Easter candies, like those little marshmallow things. I hated those things. I don't like mellow cups. I don't like really marshmallowy candy bars. I love the puffs. The banana puff that I've tried, it's the banana pudding puff that I've tried. It's phenomenal. And I love the brownie batter one. So I like that too. So definitely check that out. But sign up, be a part of what we're doing. If you want to get our content, you can sign up obviously for the daily newsletter. Send that out almost every day now. We went a while where we weren't sending it. Sometimes we don't send it out every day, but we send it out almost every day. And of course, subscribe, hit that like button, hit the notification bell, and you will find out when we will be going live tomorrow. So everybody have a great rest of your day. I'm going to be taking the guys out to dinner tonight. This is the first time I've had the whole Irish Breakdown team in the area. So we're going to be going out and having some wings tonight. I'm very excited about that after we get all of our work done. So that'll be a ton of fun. So watching some hoops and just enjoying the guys and just kind of talking about what our future holds. Because if you think about all that they've done in 2 months and what we've done as a team in 2 months, and they're just getting started and we're just getting started, I'm super, super excited about the direction that we're going. So everybody have a great, great rest of your day, and have a wonderful Friday. And we will talk to you all again tomorrow. Thanks for being with us on the Irish Breakdown podcast. And Dante Moore's not looking at LSU.